I've been saving up a lot lately. My name's Cassie, and I can't help but smirk at my phone with a sneaky laugh. I'm 29 now, married for 2 years, and working hard as a housewife. Some of my coworkers think my smirk is weird, but I can't stop because I'm so close to saving enough money to build my dream home. The balance in my bank account is almost there. My husband Max and I don't have kids yet, but we've always planned to have some once we have our own home. I wanted to stay single a bit longer, but at 27, I fell in love with Max, who's a bit older than me. We work at the same company but in different departments, which can be awkward, but I've stuck with it because finding a new job would mean less money. Now, after a lot of hard work, I'm almost ready to buy our dream home. It's been quite a journey. Life with my husband is smooth sailing, and our savings are growing steadily. We're content with our ordinary jobs and our plan to buy a simple home. Finding joy in this regular life is what makes me happiest. But there's one big hiccup: my relationship with my in-laws. It's the toughest part of being married. When I come home from work to our small rented apartment, seeing my in-laws' shoes at the door instantly drains me. They seem to be here again today. I let out a heavy sigh. I'm home. Oh, you're back. The one who responds isn't my husband Max, but my mother-in-law, comfortably seated on our cramped sofa. Good evening. Do you always come home this late? Our in-laws live just 3 train stops away, which is too close for comfort. That's why my mother-in-law often drops by without considering the inconvenience. You're home late again. What about Max's dinner? This happens too often. No sympathy for my long work hours, just complaints from my mother-in-law. I'm sorry, work was hectic. I'll cook something now. Max has been home for a while. Cassie, aren't you a bit inefficient? Even though Max and I work at the same company, our jobs are very different. Max rarely has overtime in his department, but he earns less. My department, however, is crucial to the company, often requiring me to work late. That's why I earn the highest salary in the company. I never bring this up myself, and I wish Max would, but maybe his pride gets in the way. He never speaks up. Right now, he's just quietly drinking his tea. Even though we both work, I feel like Max could pitch in a bit with the housework, but he steadfastly avoids it. Whether it's shopping, laundry, cleaning, preparing the bath, or cooking, when he gets home from work, he's either glued to the TV or absorbed in his phone. Oblivious to all this, my mother-in-law, as usual, came over to criticize me today. It's okay. I already had dinner with Max. Oh, you've eaten? We had some amazing sushi. I decided to treat Max to something nice for a change. I see. I was taken aback when I heard the name of the sushi restaurant. Isn't that an upscale place? Though surprised, since my mother-in-law footed the bill, I decided to let it slide and started heading to the kitchen to make my own dinner. But my mother-in-law stopped me. Cassie, I hate to ask, but could you do me a favor? I'm a bit short on cash this month. Could you lend me some? Just as I suspected, my mother-in-law often asks for money like this. I wanted to say, hold on a second. That doesn't seem right. You went to a fancy sushi restaurant, didn't you? And last month, you said you were struggling and begged for money. I reluctantly gave you $300, even though we're also tight on cash. And the month before that, and the one before that. Aren't you being a bit careless? But I held back and managed a strained smile. I'm sorry, we're all having a tough time this month. Can't you do anything for your struggling parents? You're the cold one, not me. Who's really cold here? Your son, who neglects his duties at home, leaves his wife alone, and goes out to eat sushi. Seems pretty cold to me. Finally, my husband Max chimed in. Cassie's mom is in a tough spot. Can't you lend her a hand? Oh, so we're really struggling this month, huh? Well, Mom, I'll help you out. Max sighed and pulled $500 from his wallet, handing it to his mother. Max is such a kind and wonderful son, unlike Cassie. I was stunned as my mother-in-law shot me a glare and headed for the door. I thought she was leaving, but then she turned back and glared at me again. Max, if you ever want to divorce your money-hungry wife, You're always welcome to come back home. I'll keep that in mind. With a slam, my mother-in-law left. What was that all about? I turned to Max, who was already lounging on the sofa with his phone. I confronted him. Why did you give her $500? If we have that much extra cash, why not put it towards our household expenses? I had my reasons for asking. While Max pays the rent for this apartment, that's the extent of his contributions. I cover all the bills like utilities, phone, groceries, and other expenses because Max refuses to chip in. What do you mean? I pay the rent, don't I? You expect more than just that. You're so greedy. That's Max's usual way of avoiding financial responsibility. I'm taking care of everything else, including the phone bill you're holding. It's understandable you earn more, but I only make a bit more than your salary. We're barely making ends meet with our expenses and savings. Oh, you have enough to save? Then you should be fine. Suddenly, he reached out his hand when I mentioned savings. What's this for? I gave my mom $500, and now I'm broke. Can you lend me some cash? What? Seriously. This is unbelievable. Despite keeping almost all of his salary except for rent, Max always claims he's short on money every month. He used to justify it by saying, "A man needs to socialize and entertain," and I reluctantly went along. But not today. Why should I foot the bill for you and your mom's sushi? Why am I responsible for that? It's a way to honor parents. What about me? Neither Max nor my mother-in-law ever show appreciation. It feels like I'm just a paycheck to them. And what was that about considering divorce? Exactly what it sounds like. If you keep being so tight-fisted, I might have to consider it. With that, Max locked himself in the bedroom. He even went as far as locking the bedroom door. In our tiny apartment, there aren't many places to go. With the bedroom inaccessible, my only option was to sleep on the sofa. These days, amid all the stress, the only solace I find is in checking my bank account balance. After enduring yet another round of sarcasm and financial demands from my mother-in-law, I opened my phone before starting my overtime shift at work. Logging into my savings account, which I've had since I was single, I thought everything was on track for our dream home. That is, until I saw something that made me freeze. What's going on? I exclaimed, abruptly apologizing to my boss before rushing home. Max, are you here? Oh, what's going on? You're home early today. Max looked surprised. Before him lay an assortment of what looked like expensive sushi, and he wasn't alone. Welcome home, Cassie. We're just visiting. Both in-laws were present, not just my mother-in-law, but my father-in-law too. I couldn't help but wonder why they were here. What's happening? We're having sushi. Want some, Cassie? Sushi? Where did this come from? Oh, we had some extra cash, they replied. Pressing for more details, both Max and my in-laws seemed taken aback. I grabbed Max's collar, as if to keep him from escaping, and he reluctantly handed me something. It was the bank book for the account I had just checked online. Flipping it open, I was left speechless when I saw the transaction history. What's going on? How did you withdraw this? I demanded, my anger rising. Well, I just guessed the PIN, and it worked. Lucky me, right? Max replied casually, showing no remorse for taking out a large sum of money without my consent. I was furious and on the verge of exploding at Max for his nonchalant attitude. How dare you take my money without asking? The funds I had diligently saved since my single days have been withdrawn without my knowledge. Come on, we're married, aren't we? What's mine is yours. Don't be so uptight. This is the savings I've worked hard for since before we got married. Give it back. Relax, Cassie. What's yours is mine, naturally, Max said dismissively. Living off Max's support while secretly saving such a large amount of money. You're so greedy, Max accused, his tone accusatory. Yeah, exactly. You should appreciate me more. Who do you think you're depending on? It's unbelievable. I feel like I'm alone in this. Don't joke around. Taking my money like this is no different from theft. Give it back. Who's joking? Max snapped, clearly startled by the accusation. Annoyed, he continued, Don't forget, I'm the one paying the rent here, and I have plenty of social obligations to fulfill. Plus, I help my parents. Right. Max is such a wonderful son. You leave the rent to me and secretly save all this money. It's easy for you. You only cover the rent. You hardly ever entertain, yet you ask me for money while supporting your parents. Stop it. You married into this. It's only right for you to respect me and my parents. What's more, be grateful I haven't divorced you for being so useless, Max yelled, grabbing my hand and pushing me out the door. Hey, no sushi for you. Go cool off outside. I never expected to be kicked out. After standing there in shock for a while, I ended up spending the night in a business hotel. The next day, when I returned home, only Max was there. I was relieved the in-laws were gone. But then Max handed me a piece of paper. It was a mutual agreement statement stating that if I didn't obey him, we would divorce. What's this? Listen, if you keep complaining, we're getting divorced. If you don't want that, just obey me silently. I'll take charge of the savings from now on, Max declared, flaunting the bank book. Then he got ready to leave. Where are you going? Out for a drink. What? Do you have a problem? Want a divorce? He taunted with a smirk and left. Such a foolish man. Did he really think threatening divorce would make me comply? My love for Max had completely vanished. Besides, did he seriously think there was still money left in the account he emptied? I had already withdrawn it all and moved it to another account. I felt uneasy keeping a large sum in one place, so I had multiple accounts. The bank book Max took was just one of them. I signed the paper without hesitation. Max's attempt at a threat didn't faze me. It was exactly what I desired. Quickly, I packed my belongings and left the house. I spent another night at a business hotel, and the following day, I took a day off work to file for divorce as soon as the city office opened. Then, I headed straight to a real estate agency. The previous night, while browsing on my phone at the hotel, I stumbled upon a property that caught my attention. A newly built detached family home near the station, perfect for commuting. It was almost love at first sight. The exterior and interior matched what I had envisioned. After viewing it, I made the decision to purchase the house on the spot. From then on, everything happened in a whirlwind. Staying in a business hotel until the move became too costly, so I explained my situation and stayed with a friend while getting ready for the new house. I had to start from scratch with furniture and other arrangements. Amid the whirlwind of activity, I completely forgot about my ex-husband and former in-laws. Hey, Cassie! Max's voice startled me one day when he showed up at my workplace. Oh, right, we work at the same company. As Max loudly called my name, drawing everyone's attention, he approached me without hesitation. Why haven't you been returning my calls? Oh, I didn't think they were important, I replied, remembering Max's persistent calls. I was preoccupied and didn't want the hassle, so I ignored them. You withdrew money from the account on your own, didn't you? Stop playing around. And why haven't you come back home? Do you really want to get divorced? It's fine, I replied nonchalantly. We're already divorced, and that money in the account is mine, so I can do as I please with it, I stated firmly. Max still seemed to view the word divorce as a threat. My casual response left him looking bewildered. What a silly expression. It's almost comical. What divorce? You mean you graciously offered it to me, and I graciously accepted, I remarked. What? I don't accept this, Max protested. Whether you accept it or not, the divorce is final. Oh, and I've already informed the company and completed all the necessary procedures. You might have some paperwork to handle, so make sure to report it to your boss, okay? With that, I redirected my attention to my computer. I'm busy. Where are you living now? You left your belongings at the house, Max inquired. I took what I needed. I'm comfortably settled in with new things I bought. Don't worry about me. And as for your whereabouts, that's none of your concern. This is a matter of privacy, so please refrain from prying any further, I replied firmly. With that, Max fell silent. Eventually, feeling the weight of the stares from my colleagues and boss, Max left the department without saying another word. Cassie's been through a lot. My colleagues sympathized. The comfort of my new home was unparalleled. The scent of a freshly built house was unforgettable. It was spacious and cozy. However, having just moved in, there were still many things I needed. Today, I was anticipating the delivery of some appliances I had ordered online. Then the intercom rang. Ah, it must be here, I thought as I went to open the door. I immediately regretted it. I cursed myself for not checking the intercom. Standing before me was Mother. Technically, my former mother-in-law, but the words slipped out in my surprise. There she stood, accompanied by my former father-in-law. And further back, Max was lingering. "Long time no see, Cassie." "I'm coming in," Mother announced. "Wait, hold on," I protested, taken aback. My former mother-in-law barged into the house and began inspecting it as if assessing its value. "Oh, this property is quite nice. And this furniture is lovely. Move it to my room, will you? Oh, there's a basement too." "Excellent. Then this will be our room," she declared. Excuse me, but what's with these curtains? Dreadful taste. I'll choose new ones for you, so hand over the money," she continued. "The garden is quite spacious. Perhaps I'll start a vegetable garden." What were these people going on about? Confused, I turned to Max. "Max, what is?" "Be grateful, Cassie," Max interjected. I was about to confront them when my former mother-in-law cut in with irritation. I looked at her smug expression. "It's not much of a house, but as a gift for the parents, it's decent. If it's a two-family home, we'll move in. Of course, as the wife, you'll do the housework. We'll be generous and only ask for $1,000 a month for our allowance." What? What on earth is she saying? Are they from another planet? I couldn't comprehend and just tilted my head. "As the wife, I'm single now, you know," I added, surprising both my former mother-in-law and myself. "Max, you didn't tell them?" I questioned. "I don't accept it," Max shouted. But it didn't matter whether he accepted it or not. The divorce was final. We were complete strangers now. Upon hearing my declaration, my former mother-in-law's face paled. "What do you mean you're abandoning us?" "Your parents. My parents live in the countryside. I was planning to invite them over soon," she protested. "Don't joke around. This house is ours," she insisted. "No, it's mine," I retorted. What was she thinking? This house was purchased with my savings in my name. "Then where are we supposed to live?" she demanded. "I don't know. That's not my problem," I replied, feeling the weight of their expectations. Apparently, they had already sold their house, and the contract was finalized. They planned to live a comfortable life in this house with the money from the sale and whatever they could extort from me. It was a frightening plan. "I don't accept this," my former mother-in-law continued to protest. "But it doesn't matter. We're strangers now, and this house is mine. I won't accept it, absolutely not," I asserted firmly. In her anger, my former mother-in-law ripped the curtains. "Hey, what are you doing? These things I don't need, such bad taste. This is my house. I'll dim as I please," I snapped back. "That's right. What's yours is mine. Everything you own is mine," she insisted. "Listen, I don't accept this divorce, and both my parents and I are going to live here," Max shouted out. "Oh no, this is getting out of hand," I thought, just as I heard sirens. I had secretly called the police when Max and my former mother-in-law barged into the house. Finally, the police arrived. "What are you doing?" "We haven't done anything wrong," they protested. "That's right. If anyone should be taken, it's this woman," my former mother-in-law added. After a scene, they weren't arrested but were escorted away by the police. It had been a tumultuous day. After being released, Max continued to come by, insisting on reconciliation and getting picked up by the police each time. He even followed me to work. So after consulting with my boss, George, he received the stern warning. Misusing his wife's savings and assaulting her new home became the talk of the office, leading to an uncomfortable working environment for Max. His resignation seemed to affect him mentally, and he struggled to find new employment. My former in-laws, having sold their house, moved into the cheap apartment where Max and I had lived. It was an old, poorly maintained place, so it wouldn't have fetched much money. With the money from the sale, it seems like the three of them will be able to live modestly. Finally free from all the drama, I'm relishing the comfort of my own home. Although I offered to have my parents from the countryside move in with me, they're not quite ready to make the move yet. So, for the time being, I'm enjoying the solitude of living alone. Perhaps I'll consider remarrying if the right person comes along. But for now, I'm content. One of the first things on my agenda is to get a dog, something I couldn't do while living in the apartment. I also have plans to try my hand at gardening and to host home parties with friends. As I gaze out the window at the blue sky, I think about all the things I couldn't do before and how I want to embrace and enjoy life from now on.
Michael was born, as they say in such cases, with a silver spoon in his mouth. His father, Ben Becker, was one of the most influential businessmen in the region. He had made his fortune 20 years ago and strengthened his position with every passing year. He had 2 children, a son named Michael and a daughter named Dana. Dana was 5 years older than Michael. The children lost their mother at a very young age. She died of cancer when Dana was 7 and Michael was just 2. Michael barely remembered his mother. He had only vague memories of someone gorgeous reading him bedtime stories. He couldn't recall her face or voice, no matter how hard he tried. Their father was a man of strict principles and rules. In front of his children, he always behaved impeccably, serving as a living example in all things. Of course, he loved his son and daughter deeply, and they knew and felt his love. However, they never saw the ordinary weaknesses and emotions that other people displayed. Only once in his life did Michael see his father's armour crack slightly, revealing a man with feelings and worries. He was sitting in his office, holding a photograph and murmuring, as if in conversation with someone. 8-year-old Michael, struck by this unusual sight, froze in the doorway and closed his eyes in surprise. When he opened them, his father was once again the familiar, stern, restrained, and just man. After graduating from the best university in the country, Dana became an excellent lawyer, while Michael earned a degree in economics. By the age of 30, Michael was an outstanding specialist in his field, his father's right-hand man in managing a vast holding company, and the recognized heir to the family business. Michael disliked appearing at the company's central office. He was irritated by the fawning looks, smiles, and attempts to form special friendships. However, one day he had to visit his father. As he walked down the long corridor, greeting familiar faces and shaking hands, he indifferently glanced at the surroundings and objects. Suddenly, something new and unusual caught his eye. He stopped abruptly and took a few steps back. There it was. The door to one of the offices was open. On the windowsill of a half-open window stood a woman, slender and petite. The day was very sunny, and the streams of light bathed her figure in a golden glow. Around her head shimmered a halo. Fearing for his sanity, Michael shook his head and looked again. After a few seconds, he realized that it was her reddish hair, illuminated by the sun, creating this unusual effect. The woman fearlessly washed the window on the 4th floor of the office building. Michael, who had been afraid of heights since childhood, felt a twinge of fear. He waited until the woman nimbly jumped down from the windowsill before entering the office and clearing his throat. She turned to him sharply and looked him straight in the eye. She was a young girl, perhaps 25 or slightly younger. The girl had a round face with a playful upturned nose and a small mouth with upturned corners in a slight smile. Light freckles were scattered around her nose, as if a few golden specks had settled on her face. Her large eyes were a dark hazel colour. Her hair was not just reddish, but a noble dark bronze hue, slightly curly, with small amusing tufts escaping from 2 short braids on the sides of her head. She was of average height, reaching Michael's shoulder, with a slender and delicate build, yet she exuded strength and energy. Her small but strong hands confidently held the window cleaner, and it was clear that she needed no help. Michael smiled as he looked at her, simply enjoying the sight. The pause grew longer, and he knew he had to say something. "You shouldn't do that," he blurted out. "It's dangerous. You might fall out the window. Let me help you." Feeling foolish, Michael turned and hurried out of the office. For the rest of the day, Michael couldn't get the image of the girl with the window cleaner out of his mind. He kept remembering her charming face in every detail, even the small, thin, barely noticeable scar on her chin. That evening, he played tennis until he was exhausted, and then read a contract carefully, hoping to present it to his father the next day. Finally, utterly exhausted, he took a shower and went to bed. Yet the last thing he saw before drifting off to sleep was the small, upturned face with red braids on either side. The following days were filled with tasks, problems, worries and travels that swept Michael into their whirlwind. Over the weekend, his family celebrated his father's anniversary, and, naturally, Michael, along with his sister, was an essential participant in all the official and unofficial events. But no matter what he did or where he was, the vision of the girl from the office window kept flashing through his mind like a golden spark. The next week, to everyone's surprise, especially his own, Michael found himself at the company's main office. He wandered through all the rooms, peeked into the conference hall, and even the cafeteria, realizing he was searching for the red-haired cleaner. But he couldn't find her anywhere, and this made him sad. "Listen, Fred," Michael said to one of the office managers, "I need to find out about someone. A cleaner works here in our office. I want to know who she is. Red-haired with braids." He wanted to add that she was cute, so even Fred would immediately understand who he was talking about, but he restrained himself. "Oh," Fred was clearly confused and didn't know how to explain Michael's interest in some cleaner, but wisely decided it was none of his business. "Yes, there is someone like that. She usually comes in the evenings. I think her name is Joan or Jenny, I'm not sure. But if you need, give me 5 minutes and I'll find out everything." Seeing Fred's curiosity, which he couldn't hide no matter how hard he tried, Michael suddenly thought, "What am I doing? Why am I getting involved where I shouldn't? Nothing can connect me with this girl. I need to stop and get myself together." Suppressing his feelings, he looked at Fred coldly, politely but authoritatively, as only their family could. "No, thank you. Please excuse the trouble. I don't need anything." A month passed. That day, an important event was taking place in the office. A board of directors meeting. Managers from various branches and departments had gathered to report on their work and receive new strategic directives from the company's leadership. Everyone was upbeat, excited, and, as usual at such events, a little anxious. This state is often masked by feigned cheerfulness and enthusiasm. One such enthusiast greeted Michael right at the office entrance. It was the head of one of the company's out-of-town branches. Michael had no respect for this unpleasant, overweight and somewhat foolish sycophant. He knew his father kept him in that position solely because of his extensive connections in the city where the branch was located. Michael shook the sweaty hand, feeling as if his own hand had sunk into dough. He barely resisted the urge to wipe his hand immediately with a handkerchief. Panting heavily, Shepherd leaned in confidently so everyone could see and appreciate his closeness to the boss's son. "Well, Michael, we'll get our marching orders from the bosses, and then it's off to the restaurant, right?" He laughed again, his whole body shaking, and winked at Michael. Some people really need to stop eating out so much, people thought, but said nothing aloud. He simply shrugged and stepped away from Shepherd, especially since the office manager, Mary, was rushing towards him with a huge stack of papers. "Mr. Becker, here, you need to review these urgently," she said. Michael turned around, and what happened next seemed to unfold in slow motion. Shepherd's massive figure suddenly swayed, he flailed his arms, spun around, and then collapsed face first onto the floor with a thunderous crash. The bustling office, filled with conversations, laughter, greetings and phone calls, fell silent instantly. After a few seconds, everyone rushed to the fallen man and gathered around him, but no one dared to touch him. "We should probably call an ambulance," someone said. "Yes, of course, immediately, urgently," several people chimed in. People started shouting over each other, fumbling with their phones and asking questions. "Please, let me through. Allow me to pass." A voice suddenly called out from behind the crowd gathered around the fallen Mr. Shepherd. With evident difficulty, a girl with red braids pushed her way between the bewildered security guards and rushed to the man lying on the floor. Kneeling down, she quickly grasped his wrist and placed her fingers of her other hand on his neck. Then, touching his lips with her palm, she looked up at the crowd with her large eyes. "He's not breathing and there's no pulse. Help me turn him onto his back," she said. Straining with all her might, she tried to turn the massive man, who seemed 3 times her size. No one moved, as if paralyzed. Only the frightened whimpering of some of the women could be heard. Finally, Michael snapped out of his stupor and rushed to the girl's side. Kneeling painfully beside her, he helped turn the incredibly heavy body onto its back. With quick and precise movements, she loosened Shepherd's tie, unbuttoned his shirt, and began performing CPR. Michael remained on his knees in an uncomfortable position, but he paid no attention to the discomfort. Entranced, he watched the girl. Her slender hands almost disappeared into the folds of fat on Shepherd's chest. He saw the vein pulsing on her temple from the strain, her hands trembling with effort, and the struggle in her breath as she tried to force air into the man's lungs. She was clearly exhausted, but desperately fought to save his life. Suddenly, Shepherd's eyelids fluttered. His body shuddered, and he took a gasping breath. The girl looked at him with relief and exhaustion. "Thank God," she whispered, feeling for his pulse. Satisfied with the steady beat, she nodded. "What can I do? How can I help?" Michael asked, eager to be of use. "Is there something I can do to make this easier for you?" He cursed himself for not knowing her name. She looked at Michael as if noticing him for the first time. "Open the window, he needs fresh air," she said, taking a deep breath herself. Michael jumped up and rushed to the window, nearly breaking the handle as he flung it open. He turned back to see the crowd around Shepherd beginning to stir and murmur, now that the immediate danger had passed. A few minutes later, a paramedic entered the office. After examining the man and listening to the girl's report, he called for a stretcher. Soon, the only remnants of the incident were a slight buzz of excitement and hushed conversations. Everyone seemed relieved and proud, as if they had each personally performed a heroic deed. The real heroine, however, sat calmly on the floor, ignoring everyone as she breathed in the fresh autumn air. With evident effort, she stood up and jumped lightly in place to restore circulation to her legs. You're amazing. How did you know what to do?" he asked. "Well, I am a certified nurse," she replied with a smile. "It would be strange if I didn't know first aid." "A nurse? Then why? Why are you here?" Michael stammered. "Cleaning floors?" she finished for him. What's wrong with that? The pay here is excellent, and the hours are convenient. I work 3 evening shifts a week at the hospital. The hospital? Which hospital? Michael asked, raising his eyebrows. The one where I work as a nurse. I moonlight here because I need the money, she explained, a hint of apology in her voice. Michael? His father's voice boomed across the office, effortlessly rising above the noise. Come here, it's time to start. I need you. The girl glanced nervously at the door and took a few quick steps toward the exit. Wait, please, Michael called, catching up to her and slightly touching her arm. What's your name? Joan, she replied with a smile. Thank you, Joan, Michael said, looking at her with admiration. We will definitely see each other again. He called over his shoulder as he hurried to his father, who was waiting impatiently across the office. Looking back a moment later, he saw that the slender figure with the playful red braids had disappeared, and Michael suddenly felt lonely. The next day, Michael sat at his computer in his office, doing nothing. His mood was inexplicable, a mix of apathy and fatigue. The workday had ended an hour ago, and almost everyone had left. Only the sounds of a few die-hard workaholics could be heard from some of the offices. Michael sat with his chair tilted back, rocking gently, a habit that had broken more than one office chair over the years. He closed his eyes, leaning back until the chair creaked ominously. What was wrong with him? The door to his office opened, and through his lashes, he saw a slim figure with short braids standing in the doorway. Oh, hello, I'm sorry, I didn't know you were still here, a voice said. Wait, Joan, don't go, Michael said, jumping up from his chair and knocking over a trinket on his desk. The girl struggled to keep from laughing as she watched him. Come in, please, he said, trying to regain his composure. She entered the office, her eyes sparkling with amusement. There was something uniquely joyful about her, and Michael found himself captivated once again. Michael finally rose from his ridiculous chair and approached the cleaner, looking her in the face. I'm bothering you, aren't I? I'll leave now, but please promise to grant me one request. He folded his hands in a comical, pleading gesture. If you don't, I'll follow you all evenings and disturb your work. She looked at him in astonishment, and even set the bucket of water she had just lifted back down on the floor. Agree to have dinner with me tonight, okay? Michael was already mentally planning where he could take her to talk quietly without running into anyone who might spread gossip around town the next day. So Joan's response came as a surprise. No, I'm sorry, I can't. I have other plans for tonight. Michael felt as if he had been doused with cold water. But why, Joan? He suddenly realized that getting her to agree to spend the evening with him was the most important thing in his life. I'm just inviting you to a cafe with good intentions, don't get me wrong. Or is it because I'm the boss's son? Joan looked at him steadily and resolutely. No, it's not because of that, although that is important. But it's not the main reason. I just can't. I have things to do. I'm sorry, Mr. Becker, but if you don't mind, I need to finish cleaning here quickly. I have very little time. Joan was already busy with her mop, and Michael stood in the middle of his office staring at her foolishly. What stung him the most was not the refusal, but the fact that she called him Mr. Becker, as if erecting a barrier between them. A few days later, Shepherd showed up at the office toward the end of the workday. He had been discharged from the hospital and was making the rounds, gleefully accepting congratulations on his recovery. Finally, he settled at one of the tables in a large common area and began an impromptu press conference. Well, I sure gave you all a scare, didn't I? He laughed loudly. But don't worry, I'm not that easy to take down. You office weaklings drop at the slightest thing, but I'm made of tougher stuff. Anyway, We should celebrate this. What do you say?" Almost everyone still had fresh, frightening memories of this very man, supposedly tough, collapsing and lying lifeless on the floor. And he probably would have been in a grave for several days now, if not for a lucky coincidence. But everyone remained silent, out of a delicacy, others out of indifference. But Michael, who had just emerged from his office and was standing in the doorway, did not remain silent. "Maybe that's enough, tough guy," he said sharply and loudly. "And maybe you should ease up on the celebrations. Take better care of your health, because next time there might not be an angel nearby to save you. By the way, don't you want to know who saved you? Who pulled you back from the grave?" Just then Joan entered the room with a bucket and mop. Not expecting to see so many people in the office at that hour, she looked at her watch confused and turned to leave. "Just in time. Joan, please, don't go," Michael said, approaching the girl and standing beside her. "Here she is, your saviour. You owe your life to her, so at least say thank you." Shepherd, squinting nearsightedly and not bothering to lift his bulk from the table, chuckled. "Oh, it's easy enough to thank someone like her." He reached into his pocket, pulled out his wallet, took out a few bills, and tossed them onto the table. "Here, take this as a token of my gratitude." Joan stood with her head held high, her large brown eyes glistening with tears. In complete silence, she turned and left the room. Michael approached the table where Mr. Shepherd sat. With one swift motion, he gathered the bills into his fist and threw them in the man's smug face. "Get out of here!" he hissed. He found Joan in a small storeroom where cleaning supplies were kept. She sat on an overturned bucket, staring blankly. She wasn't crying or hysterical, nor did she blame anyone. She was just silently enduring yet another deep and cruel insult in her life, adding another scar to her heart. Michael had intended to launch into a speech about how wrong and undignified some people's behaviour was, how foolish it was to pay them any attention, and so on. Instead, he took another bucket, turned it over, and sat down next to her. "He's an idiot," he said softly, gently taking Joan's hand in his. She turned her head and looked at him with a slight smile. "And so am I," Michael added for some reason. "Let's go. It's evening and it's getting late. I hate evenings." "And I love evenings. And I hate mornings," Joan suddenly replied, covering his hands with hers. Michael and Joan found themselves at a small Italian restaurant, where Michael believed the best lasagna in town was served. However, Joan seemed indifferent to the charm of the place. She confessed that while the food was delicious, she didn't enjoy dining in such establishments, preferring the open air and freedom of the countryside. "I don't want to seem ungrateful, Michael," Joan said, shrugging non-committedly. "It's beautiful here and the food is excellent, but I'm not fond of places like this. I prefer the countryside, where I can stretch my arms, take a deep breath, and feel like a bird." Suddenly inspired, Joan suggested, "Would you like to see my favourite spot in the city?" Her eyes sparkled with excitement, a sight Michael had never witnessed in their brief acquaintance. "Let's go there now, it's not far," she urged. The city, perched on the high bank of a mighty river, boasted several bridges. The oldest among them had long been closed for repairs, though no works had yet begun. For years the approaches to the bridge had been dug up and littered with construction debris, overgrown with weeds and shrubs. It was to this spot that Michael drove, following Joan's directions. "Here it is," Joan declared triumphantly, gesturing toward the barely visible bridge in the gathering dusk. "Come on!" She opened the door and hopped out of the car. Michael was less than thrilled at the prospect of venturing onto a dilapidated bridge in the dark, risking life and limb. "Joan, wait!" he called out, trying to stop her. "Wait for me!" "Just watch your step," her voice echoed from ahead. Come on, hurry up! Left with no choice, Michael switched on his phone's flashlight and followed Joan, cursing the romantic whims of certain red-haired individuals. He cautiously picked his way along the faint path, guided by the bobbing light ahead. A narrow pedestrian walkway ran along the edge of the bridge. Michael stopped abruptly, his lifelong fear of heights gripping him. Even when driving across bridges, he would squint and stare straight ahead, eager to get past the chasm beneath as quickly as possible. Now, a mere 2-meter-wide strip of metal lay before him, with rickety railings separating him from the vast, dark void to his left. His palms grew damp, and his heart raced. "Michael, where are you? Come here quickly!" Joan's voice beckoned from ahead. Michael squeezed his eyes shut and forced himself to take a step forward. Joan stood about 50 meters from the bridge's entrance, her face radiant with enormous shining eyes, arms outstretched. "Just look!" she exclaimed. Michael mustered all his willpower and turned to face the direction Joan indicated. Before them lay a sea of lights framing the dark, shimmering river. The evening air was cool and refreshing. Michael, a long-time city dweller, accustomed to the hustle and bustle of urban life, had long forgotten the simple pleasure of gazing at the stars. Life's hectic pace left little time for such moments, but tonight the sight was breathtaking. Against the backdrop of twinkling lights reflected in the river, Joan's slender figure stood out, her auburn hair dancing in the breeze. At that moment, Michael realized that for this girl, he would conquer any height. After their adventure on the bridge, he drove Joan to her small apartment on the city's outskirts. Though he longed to embrace her, he merely shook her hand awkwardly. Back home, Michael tossed and turned all night, berating himself for his foolish sentimentality. By morning he understood that his feelings for Joan were genuine. Joan hailed from a small village about 100 kilometers from the city. Her mother, Kathleen, was a cheerful and reckless village girl, known for her gleeful laughter that often erupted without cause. As a saleswoman in the village store, she was a familiar sight to everyone in the community, and to those who passed through, whether by chance or on business. The identity of Joan's father remained shrouded in mystery, perhaps even to Kathleen herself. It could have been one of the locals, or maybe one of the workers who had come to build the new school. The local gossips naturally attempted to unravel the mystery and determine the paternity, but their efforts yielded no clear or unanimous conclusion. From her earliest days, Joan was in the care of her grandmother, who lived in her separate house. Kathleen, after the birth of her daughter, returned to her carefree lifestyle. Fortunately, the little one had a loving granny nearby, who cherished her and took on all the responsibilities of her care. The grandmother became a real mother to Joan, though she would often shake her head sadly when looking at her wayward daughter. Joan grew up cheerful and curious, like all healthy children. Her grandmother called her sunshine, not just out of love. With her red curls framing her face, Joan truly resembled the sun, as children draw it in their pictures. When Joan turned 10, Kathleen found herself pregnant again. This time, the father was known to all, though the grandmother would grumble that it would have been better if no one had ever seen him. Frank was the village mailman, delivering the few letters, notices and newspapers to several surrounding villages and hamlets. For many years, his faithful steed had transported him, often dutifully bringing the inebriated master home when Frank had overindulged in spirits while on duty. Frank was rarely seen without the influence of these drinks, and his life was largely spent in a state of inebriation. Nevertheless, Kathleen considered such a beau as very suitable. With a difference of 3 years, Kathleen and Frank had a girl and a boy, so Joan had a sister Meg and a brother Todd. By this time, the grandmother could no longer keep up with the children as vigorously as she had when Joan was born. Joan naturally stepped into the role of primary caregiver for her younger siblings. They followed Joan everywhere, waiting for her after school and clinging to the fence until she returned. When asked whom they loved most in the world, they would chorus, "Joan!" Then one day, the grandmother suddenly seated her eldest granddaughter beside her and said seriously, "Sweetheart, you need to leave here to make something of your life. I see you're thinking of staying because of the children. Well, I won't have it. You go away from here, study, get a profession. You'll see a different life, and then you'll decide what to do next. Don't worry about the little ones. I'll take care of them. I'm still strong and thank God in my right mind. We'll manage." "But Grandma," Joan tried to object. "There's no but," the old woman insisted. She knew how to be very persuasive when necessary. "I won't let you waste your life here. I won't let you drown in laundry and chores. That's all." She tapped her palm on the table for emphasis. Joan argued with her grandmother for a long time, but inside she trembled with joy. The thought of leaving for the city, seeing a different world, meeting new people and starting a new life was exhilarating. She couldn't believe it was happening. With a happy sigh, she hugged the old woman. "Grandma, I'll go to nursing school and work and help you and come back often," she promised. The grandmother stroked her, Sunshine's head, remembering something excellent and kind from her long, hard life. Joan went to the city and, as planned, enrolled in medical school. After 3 years, she began working at the city hospital, despite her lack of real experience. The pay was much higher than in the village, and she sent half of her earnings to her grandmother. But soon, tragedy struck. Kathleen and Frank, either celebrating some event or simply indulging without reason, had consumed too much alcohol. When their house caught fire in the middle of the night, neither of them stirred. Neighbours, awakened by the glow of the flames, rushed over, but by then the house was already engulfed. Despite valiant efforts by both the villagers and the fire department, the blaze could not be extinguished. Fortunately, the children had been spending the night at their grandmother's house and were spared from the tragedy. News of the fire and her mother's death left Joan devastated. However, she couldn't afford to wallow in despair for long. Now her grandmother and the children had no one but her to rely on. They needed financial support, and Joan found a part-time job as a cleaner in a large, successful company's office. The pay was good, allowing her to clothe the children for winter and maintain a modest city life. The flexible schedule also permitted her to take night shifts at the hospital. On the surface, life seemed to stabilize, but Joan had lost her inner peace. She encountered a handsome man with an attentive gaze and an easy smile, reminiscent of the hero from her girlish dreams. Their first meeting was accidental, and she regretted that he saw her with a window washer in hand, dishevelled in old jeans. She wished she looked more presentable, thinking he might notice her then. It seemed he showed no interest, and when she learned he was the company's owner's son, she ridiculed her own dreams. "Cinderella," she thought, "and a prince? What a fool you are, Joan." And now they shared a magical evening at a restaurant and on a bridge illuminated by the city lights, feeling alone but content with only each other in the universe. The next day Michael could hardly focus, eagerly awaiting her arrival at his office. The door opened and Joan entered. Michael, who had been perched on the windowsill, quickly jumped down and stood awkwardly, unsure of how to greet her. Should he embrace her, take the mop from her hands, or wait for her to make the first move? "Good evening, Mr. Becker," Joan said calmly. "Are you still working? Should I come back later?" Michael stared at her bewildered. Why was she addressing him so formally, using his patronymic? Why was she asking when to return if he never wanted her to leave again? "Hello," Michael finally managed to say. "Joan, why are you talking like this? Didn't we agree to use our names yesterday? I've been waiting for you. There's something I want to tell you." Joan paused for a moment before responding. "Mr. Becker, I am truly grateful for last night." "Truly? But I must ask you, please, let's not talk about it anymore. Let's not do anything like that again." "Why not?" Michael asked, confused. Joan looked at him steadily. "Because nothing good will come of it. I know my place and I remember who you are." "To hell with all that!" Michael exclaimed. "Your place? What are you talking about? I love you." Joan stood still as if frozen. Then her eyes met his. No words were needed. Everything was clear. 2 months into their relationship, Michael suddenly asked, "Joan, will you marry me?" "No, of course not," Joan replied seriously without hesitation. "Why not?" Michael asked, astonished. "Because it cannot be, Michael. If you marry me, you will lose your family, and I don't want that. I love you too much for that. And you don't want that either. Let's not talk about this any more." "No, we won't stop talking about it," Michael insisted. Joan looked at him with a slightly mocking smile. "All right, then I'll tell you the truth. I don't want to marry you." Michael was taken aback. "I don't understand. Is this another one of your puzzles?" Joan grew thoughtful. "Michael, I've had little in this life except for losses, and you know what I've realized? There is no yesterday or tomorrow, only today. I am here now, and you are with me. I don't need anything else." Michael and Joan found happiness in their present moments together. Their joy was quiet and cosy, a secret they kept to themselves, fearing that others might envy or disrupt it. Michael cherished the evenings when Joan awaited him, and Joan loved the mornings when she could watch Michael enjoy the breakfast she prepared. One Sunday, they ventured to a new shopping centre. Joan adored large supermarkets, delighting in the endless aisles and escalators. "Don't make fun of me," Joan mumbled, hiding her eyes. "I'm from the middle of nowhere. It's better now, but before, the store only had 10 cans of food and paper napkins." Michael, like many men, disliked shopping, but with Joan by his side, even this seemingly pointless activity became enjoyable. Joan was fiercely independent, especially when it came to money. She refused to accept any from Michael, and when he once tried to leave her some without her knowledge, she gave him a stern warning. "If you try that again, I'll stop talking to you," she said, her eyes leaving no room for doubt. "But why?" Michael asked, genuinely puzzled. "Because," she replied firmly, her answer final. Despite her stance, Joan didn't make things awkward for Michael. She allowed him to pay for himself during their occasional outings to restaurants, movies, or nature walks. After finishing their shopping, they wheeled the cart to the underground parking lot, where Michael's car was parked. As he unloaded the groceries, one of the paper bags tore, sending a flat jar tumbling out. At that moment, Michael, a 30-year-old businessman with 2 advanced degrees, felt an irresistible, boyish urge to kick the jar. He gently nudged it toward Joan, and she responded instantly. Like children, they chased the jar across the parking lot, laughing and playfully shoving each other. Finally, Joan sent the jar under a car and turned to Michael, her face flushed with joy. Michael wrapped his arms around her, pressing her close. He buried his face in her golden hair, and she sighed contentedly, resting her head against his chest. When Michael finally looked up, he froze. Standing a few cars away was a woman staring at them. It was Dana, his sister. Joan sensed something was wrong and looked up at Michael. He kissed her gently, released her from his embrace, and turned to face Dana. He wasn't going to hide Joan from his family. He wanted to introduce them, but Dana had already disappeared. Michael scanned the parking lot, but Dana was nowhere to be seen. But he knew she wouldn't keep him waiting long. Dana rarely called Michael. Her life was a whirlwind of work, family and social obligations. She ran a successful trading company, had a husband and 2 children, and maintained an active social life. Yet Michael often wondered if she was truly happy. He asked Dana only once, when the family celebrated his graduation from the university. Dana, as always, was confident and composed as she sat next to Michael, her wine glass in hand. After delivering a heartfelt toast to his health, success and happiness, she leaned over to kiss him on the forehead before taking her seat. "Dana, are you happy?" Michael asked suddenly, catching her off guard. "Of course," Dana replied, setting her glass down. "What a silly question." Yet as she spoke, Michael noticed her hand, resting on her lap, clench into a fist and tremble slightly. He looked up and saw an expression in her eyes that he had never seen before, a mix of longing, loneliness, and boredom that startled him. The moment passed quickly, and Dana regained her usual composure, her ironic smile returning. Michael pondered this incident for a long time. Had he glimpsed the truth in Dana's eyes, or was it merely a fleeting moment of weakness? He couldn't be sure, but one thing became clear to him. He did not want to be happy in the way Dana seemed to be. The next day, Dana called. "Michael, hello," she said warmly. "How are you? Let's meet up and talk. It's been too long since we sat down together." Michael knew exactly what Dana wanted to discuss. Joan. They agreed to meet in a small park near the company office, both aware of the conversation that lay ahead. Dana, as always, exuded confidence and elegance as she sat down beside Michael on the bench. He couldn't help but notice her beauty, though he felt she lacked the softness and tenderness he so admired in Joan. Dana wasted no time with pleasantries, diving straight into the heart of the matter. "Michael, I saw you with a woman yesterday," she began, her tone resolute. "You're an adult, and you have the right to live your life as you see fit. But don't you think—" "Dana," Michael interrupted, "have you ever done something just because you wanted to? Something you believed was right, regardless of what others thought?" Dana faltered, taken aback by his question. "What does that have to do with anything? We're talking about you, Michael. I know this girl. I've seen her at the office. Girls like her—" "Dana, stop," Michael said, raising his hands. "You don't know Joan. She's not after money or status. She won't even marry me. She just wants to be with me. And that's enough for both of us." Dana scoffed, her voice cold. "Michael, there's no such thing as a person who wants nothing. She's playing you." Michael closed his eyes, weary of the argument. He knew it was pointless to try and convince Dana. "You don't understand, Dana. You can't see happiness because you're not happy yourself." Dana jumped to her feet, standing before her brother, her voice rising in frustration. "She seems to you like a simple, kind creature, a red-haired angel in the flesh. The only thing missing is the wings on her back. Don't be a fool." Dana was nearly shouting, drawing the attentions of passers-by. "I have to give her credit. She's handled you masterfully, no doubt about it. I'm almost envious of her charm and tenacity." Michael, realizing the futility of his efforts, still attempted to reason with his sister. "Dana, you don't know Joan. She doesn't want anything from me. She just wants to be with me. And that's enough for both of us. She doesn't even want to marry me. She says she doesn't need anything." Dana looked at Michael coldly, a sneer playing on her lips. "You know, Michael, when I see someone who claims they need nothing, I understand they need everything." Michael wearily closed his eyes, realizing the futility of arguing with Dana. He loved his sister deeply. However, he understood that someone unhappy could never believe in the happiness of others. He saw once again the longing and boredom in Dana's eyes that he had glimpsed before. At least think of your father. Dana finally resorted to her heaviest argument. You'll kill him with this. Michael looked at his sister with interest. Really? I don't think there are words invented yet that could kill Dad. Enough. He stood up, deciding it was time to end this pointless conversation. I'll tell Father everything myself. I won't give up Joan, no matter what happens. I must go now, Dana. Say hello to my favourite nephews. Michael wanted to end the heavy and meaningless conversation on a positive note. He tried to kiss Dana on the cheek, but she resolutely turned away, leaving him to awkwardly brush his face against her shoulder before walking away. Well, it's your life, but don't think we'll sit idly by and watch you ruin it, Dana declared meaningfully, striding away down the park alley. Michael was determined to speak with his father the very next day. As if sensing his intention, Mr. Becker called that evening, asking Michael to be at the office the following morning. The next day, Michael entered his father's expansive office. Despite frequent visits over the years, the sterility of the room always struck him. The office reflected perfectly his father's character, strong, authoritative, and incredibly intelligent, with an uncanny intuition and iron grip. Mr. Becker achieved his goals without ever needing to raise his voice or lose his composure. People naturally did as he wished, almost always. But Michael, entering the office that day, was prepared to defy his father's will. He was determined not to leave until everything was resolved. His father greeted him in the middle of the room, shaking his hand and then unusually embracing him. This unexpected gesture made it even harder for Michael to begin the difficult conversation, but he knew it was necessary. Father, I need to talk to you very seriously, Michael began. Wait, son, his father interrupted abruptly. This, too, was unusual. Mr. Becker never interrupted anyone. He always allowed others to finish speaking, often saying, If you don't listen to someone, you'll never understand them. Caught off guard, Michael fell silent. His father paced to the window and back, then stopped abruptly in front of Michael, who was seated in a chair. His face bore a look of deep concern. God, has Dana already gotten to him? Michael thought anxiously. We have serious problems, his father said, getting straight to the point as always. Our production facility has halted operations today. Mr. Becker paused, assuming he had given his son enough information to ponder, and indeed he had. Michael, fully aware of the company's situation, began to think. The faculty his father referred to was essentially a factory that produced rare and highly complex equipment. The contracts for supplying this equipment involved such large sums that their loss would spell not just trouble, but disaster for the firm. You need to sort this out as quickly as possible, his father said. I need you now, as my best manager. The shutdown is somehow related to emissions into the environment. No one but you can handle this. His father looked worried and exhausted, a sight Michael hadn't seen in a very long time. Of course, Dad, I'll do everything. When do I leave? Michael asked. The plane departs in 2.5 hours. A car is waiting for you, Mr. Becker replied, extending his hand. The issues Michael needed to address in another city were indeed serious and consumed nearly 2 weeks of his time. He called Joan every day, and their conversations brought him a sense of lightness and joy. He never imagined that simple, seemingly insignificant words could mean so much. They would greet each other cheerfully, ask about the weather and each other's health, and discuss their days, though in reality they just wanted to hear each other's voices. Are you waiting for me? Michael would ask. Of course I'm waiting, Joan would reply. This routine continued for several days until Joan's phone fell silent. Initially, Michael wasn't overly concerned. There could be many reasons why she wasn't answering. A broken phone, lost or stolen. However, as the days passed, his worry grew. He couldn't understand or explain the sudden silence. Finally, after resolving the issues with the factory launch, he rushed back home. Throughout the journey, He repeatedly dialed Joan's number, only to hear the mechanical message that the subscriber was unreachable. Upon returning to his city, he immediately went to the small apartment Joan rented. Despite their relationship, Michael had never managed to convince her to move in with him. She stubbornly clung to her independence. He rang the doorbell and listened. The apartment was completely silent. Of course. He looked at his watch and slapped his forehead. She's at work right now. Michael burst into the office like a storm. Responding to joyful greetings, smiles and handshakes, he scanned the room for Joan. Suddenly he noticed a woman with a mop, diligently cleaning under the desks, with an incredibly serious expression. "Who is that?" he asked the office manager. Mary, who happened to be nearby. "She's been working here for a few days now. Seems all right. Why do you ask?" Mary said, intrigued by Michael's interest in the support staff. "Where is the previous cleaner? The one with the reddish hair?" Michael asked, his lips barely cooperating. "She quitted, was fired. I don't know the details," Mary replied, watching Michael walk away quickly. Michael drove back to the address where Joan lived. He rang the doorbell for a long time, until an elderly woman from the neighbouring apartment came out onto the landing. "What's all the noise about?" the woman asked sternly and suspiciously. "I'm sorry, I'm looking for a young woman who lives here," Michael explained. The woman's expression softened. "Oh, she moved out. Shame, she was a good girl. Quiet, tidy, polite. Now, who knows who they'll put in there next. She said her goodbyes and left. Said she was going home." Michael couldn't understand what was happening. Why had Joan disappeared without a trace or any message for him? He sat in his office, head in hands, staring blankly at the desk. Suddenly he straightened up, recalling Dana's parting words. "Don't think we'll sit idly by and watch you ruin your life." Minutes later, Michael stormed into his father's office. "Finally!" Mr. Becker greeted him warmly. "You handled that problem brilliantly, son. Well done." He took Michael's hand and embraced him. "I thought we might celebrate. It's been a while since—" "Father, before I left, there was a girl named Joan working here as a cleaner." Michael interrupted him. "Now she's gone and I want to know why." His father's face hardened into its usual stern expression. He released Michael's hand and settled into his chair. "I thought the matter was resolved and didn't need discussing. The problem exists and we need to talk about it, because it's far more serious than you think," Michael said to his father in the same dry, businesslike tone. "I never thought we'd be discussing the hiring and firing of cleaners," his father replied ironically, looking at his son. "Stop it, father. Don't pretend you don't understand what I'm talking about," Michael retorted, his voice tense. "Listen, Michael, Dana told me about this infatuation of yours, but honestly I didn't believe her. It's nonsense. You and some red-haired village girl." "Father, I love this red-haired village girl. I was going to tell you before I left. And the fact that you got rid of her behind my back while I was away changes nothing." "Listen here, Michael." His father leaned forward, his voice cold and angry. "Maybe you don't understand something. Everything you are is because of me. Understand? You are my business venture, into which I've invested years of resources and effort, and I won't let you ruin it. If you choose to be with some penniless village girl, fine. But know this, you won't have a penny. I'll block all your cards. You won't even be able to use your car. I'll make you crawl back on your knees." Mr. Becker, usually so restrained and polite, was nearly hysterical, shouting his last words. Michael looked at his father with bitterness and regret, then turned and walked away. As he reached the door, Michael turned back to his father. "You know, Dad, It's interesting to hear that I'm some kind of long-term investment. I always thought I was your son, first and foremost. Michael fortunately knew the name of the village where Joan was born. His arrival caused quite a stir in the small village. His appearance and questions drew attention, but he eventually found the address of Joan's grandmother's house. With his heart pounding, he opened the heavy door and stepped inside. Joan stood in the middle of the room, speechless and shocked. They looked at each other, neither knowing what to say. The silence was broken by the grandmother's unexpected remark. "Not bad, quite handsome. Well, come in. No need to stand there like a statue." "Now, I'm finally your equal," Michael said to Joan. "No money, no business. Now will you marry me?" Joan laughed. "And why would I need you now? You have no bank accounts, no apartment, no job," she teased. "Besides, I have plenty of suitors here, with better homes and cars." "Well, don't count me out just yet," Michael replied. "I've almost secured a job. I'm going to build a feed mill here." "Then all right, Michael," Joan said, placing her hand over his mouth to quiet him. "I can be at peace now. For you, for myself, and for the child." "What child?" Michael asked, puzzled, staring at Joan. "Our child," she replied. Michael had found contractors and investors and was indeed building a small feed mill a short distance from the village. Joan spent most of her time at home with their son, Benny. "Wait, Joan," Michael would say, his eyes shining with excitement. "Once we make some money, I'll build us a big house, just like in the best neighborhood in the city." Michael, like a boy with a new toy, rejoiced in each of his ideas and believed in them passionately. "Listen, Michael," Joan would say, hating herself for these moments of doubt. "I understand. We have a home, the business, plans. But you're used to an entirely different life. Are you happy here in the village, with just me and Benny, and nothing else matters?" Michael would gently but firmly stop Joan and kiss her. She would smile happily at her Prince Charming. After all, the fairy tale of Cinderella had come true. Another year passed. Next to the old grandmother's house, construction began on a new home with an unprecedented scale for the area. On a warm May evening, a large, powerful SUV slowly approached their house. It stopped a short distance from the old gate and remained motionless for some time. No one got out. The occupant seemed unsure of what to do next. Finally, the door opened, and a tall, grey-haired man with a stern, determined face stepped out. The figure exuded an unshakable confidence and strength. The man glanced back and strode toward the gate. Only a few steps remained, and he reached out to open it when a voice called from behind. "Hello, father." Michael stood behind, gazing at his father. The following evening, before leaving, Mr. Becker stepped outside with his son. "Michael, I want to ask you something," the father said. "Come back, won't you? I feel terrible without you. I'll be waiting for you, Joan and little Benny." The thought of his grandson softened the stern features of the old businessman into a happy smile. "Father, you're a man of business. You should understand that I have responsibilities here. I can't just leave everything. And honestly, I enjoy living here. We enjoy it. Life here is genuine and honest, you see?" The old man looked long into his son's eyes. "I understand," he said, turning to walk to his car. Suddenly he stopped, turned back and approached his son once more. "Listen, Michael," he began, finding it difficult to speak. "I must confess something to you. I offered Joan money back then to make her leave you. I told her you would choose money and business over her. She looked at me with such disdain. I'll never forgive myself. for that. Never. She forgave you long ago, father, and so have I. I love you." The two men, father and son, stood with their hands clasped tightly together, while, beyond the fence, their little heir laughed joyfully. Aislinn had always adored New Year's Eve and everything associated with its anticipation and celebration. Despite the inevitable chaos, confusion, traffic jams, and the chronic lack of time that seemed to afflict everyone, she eagerly awaited the New Year festivities each year. Every year, she vowed to avoid the last-minute rush and the frantic search for gifts. She promised herself that this time she would plan ahead, buy gifts in advance, and even save some money so she wouldn't be left penniless by New Year's. She traditionally celebrated the holiday at her mother's house, convinced it was the only right thing. Being with her mother was comforting, cosy, and always delicious, with a real green Christmas tree and familiar lights from her childhood. This year, added to the usual pre-holiday bustle and anticipation of New Year's magic, was an exciting plan. Long before the holiday, a large group of Aislinn's friends had planned a distant trip. They intended to travel hundreds of kilometres into the mountains to celebrate the new year in a unique setting. Samantha, Aislinn's friend and one of the main inspirations behind the trip, enthusiastically described their upcoming trip. "A few hours on the road and we're at a mountain pass. The scenery is breathtaking. Mountains, pines, pristine snow. The air is incredible, and the night sky is filled with stars you've never seen before." Aislinn loved nature and appreciated its beauty deeply. Yet, to her shame, at 25 she had never visited the nearby mountain range, renowned for its natural beauty. Endless tasks and sometimes a lack of money had always gotten in the way. "Samantha, I'm not sure if I'd like—" Aislinn tried to object. They had been friends since childhood, and both had moved from their small hometown to the regional centre for further studies and met regularly, but alone and with their larger family group, mostly thanks to Samantha. Samantha, with her energetic personality, had become even more decisive since becoming the head of the legal department at a large trading firm. She was one of the initiators of the trip and had enthusiastically taken on its organisation. Hearing Aislinn's words, Samantha frowned sternly. "You must be out of your mind. Of course you're going," Samantha declared with her characteristic confidence and assertiveness. "The important thing is just to go. And besides, what are you planning to do for 10 days in the city? Lie on the couch and stuff yourself with salads? Develop a Mandarin allergy? Watch the stupid TV programmes?" Aislinn, of course, didn't tell her friend that this was practically her ideal way to spend the long New Year holidays. "And besides, you'll definitely complain later that you gained 3 centimetres around your waist during the holidays." Samantha added another serious argument against staying in the city. "If anyone needs to go, it's you. You've been complaining to yourself that you're exhausted, that you can't take a vacation, that you don't have money for a serious trip, and so on. How long have you been working without a break? A year? 2? You'll burn out in that hospital, and no one will ever remember you. So, it's not up for discussion. You're going. And don't make up excuses. And besides, how can we go without you? Who will sing for us? Half of the people are only coming because of you and your guitar." "Samantha, you're exaggerating," Aislinn laughed, hearing such a candid statement. "OK, maybe not half, but some people definitely decided to come when they found out you were going." Samantha emphasised the word some meaningfully and looked at her friend slyly. "You know who I'm talking about. Aislinn, don't play dumb. I'm talking about Kevin. He really wasn't planning to go, but when I told him you were going, he immediately asked what day we were leaving, how much we were pitching in, and so on." That was a very compelling argument, perhaps the most compelling one Samantha could have made. Aislinn couldn't help but admit to herself that she really liked the young man named Kevin. Yes, Samantha knew exactly which of Aislin's buttons to push. Kevin was a handsome, confident guy who dressed well and drove an impressive sports car. Yet he wasn't a spoiled rich. Kevin worked as a sales representative for a large company, the same one where Samantha was the head of the legal department. "He's a hard worker," Samantha would authoritatively declare. "He works like a camel. His sales are higher than others, and his client base is solid. So our Kevin earns his money for clothes, gas, and restaurants honestly." Until recently, Aislin's interactions with him had been limited to greetings and a few polite, meaningless words. But at one of the parties, Kevin suddenly sat down next to her, and they unexpectedly hit it off. It turned out that he was a fan of rock, which Aislinn had been passionate about since her early youth. Kevin was an incredibly interesting conversationalist, well-read, had seen many classic films, and had even travelled to several European countries. In short, after that evening, Aislinn saw Kevin in an entirely different light. He was truly attractive, and it was gratifying to realise that his attractiveness wasn't just superficial. Then he disappeared for a long time, and they only met again a couple of months later at the end of summer at someone's birthday party with a barbecue out of town. The atmosphere was fitting, and Aislinn brought her guitar. That evening Aislinn was in her element. She played and sang her best songs, feeling everyone's eyes on her and hearing their sincere applause. But she felt Kevin's gaze most intensely, slightly surprised and radiant. Perhaps it was because of this gaze that her fingers were particularly agile that day, and her voice sounded perfect. Tired of her solo performance, Aislinn put down her instrument and stepped away from the merry company. "That was simply wonderful," she heard a familiar deep voice. "I had no idea you played so well and sang even better." Kevin stood beside her, smiling, then took her hand, gently squeezing her fingers, and lightly embraced her shoulders. They sat together, adding twigs to the faintly glowing fire, and remained silent. That light embrace was the only one they shared. Kevin either lacked the resolve, or perhaps it wasn't his intention to do more. Aislinn frankly didn't know how to feel about it all, or what to do if the young man suddenly decided to kiss her. Growing up in a small town that resembled a village and moving to the capital after high school, she was inexperienced in matters of relationships. She had never been close friends with any boys, either in school or college. After becoming a certified nurse and desperately needing money, she started working a lot, taking on extra shifts. With such a work tempo, there was neither time nor energy left for courtship. Besides, there weren't many places where Aislinn could meet a potential suitor. The evening by the campfire ended, and Kevin suddenly shivered. "It's gotten cold, hasn't it? Listen, are you staying overnight, or should I give you a lift to the city? I have a car and I plan to go home. I can take you wherever you need to go." Aislinn of course agreed. She didn't want to stay in the cramped cottage with a bunch of not-so-sober friends, nor did she want to drag herself to the train with a guitar on her back. The prospect of sitting in a car next to Kevin, very close to him, was extremely appealing. Throughout the journey, Kevin politely chatted with Aislinn about everything and nothing. They reached the city quickly, much sooner than Aislinn would have liked. Kevin drove her to the entrance of the apartment building, where she rented a flat, and gallantly helped her out of the low car, offering his hand. "Well, thanks for the ride," Aislinn said with a forced, cheerful smile. "I'm off." "I was delighted to see you," Kevin suddenly said, his eyes lighting up again, as they had when he watched her playing and singing. "I hope we meet again soon." And unexpectedly, he kissed her on the cheek. "Thank goodness it's late evening, and the light in front of the entrance has been out for ages," she thought, feeling her face flush. "Yeah, okay, bye," she replied, not very cleverly, and rushed into the entrance. Aislinn couldn't answer whether Kevin was serious about meeting again, or if his interest in her was limited to her ability to sing. But he had kissed her goodbye. Did that mean something? The impressions of the evening and the trip to the city lingered in Aislinn's imagination for a while, and then she was swept up in her usual work routine. Then preparations for the trip began, and finally she felt the long-awaited approach of the new year. She hardly thought about Kevin during this time, and then, out of the blue, Samantha seriously declared that Kevin was going to the mountains because of her, Aislinn. Even if Samantha was exaggerating, the main thing was that he was coming. What if, under the stars that Samantha described so vividly, something beautiful really did happen between them, the kind of story Aislinn had dreamed of since childhood? Suddenly, Aislinn really wanted to go, so much so that the remaining 10 days before the new year, usually frightening in their brevity, seemed endlessly long. "I'm going for sure," she told Samantha, and began preparing for the trip. First, she bought an absolutely stunning ski suit. She had hated skiing since childhood, since her first school lessons when the gym teacher made them run laps around the school on a broken, thawed track with old wooden skis. Such a purchase, and at an outrageous price, would never have occurred to her, but trying on the dark blue jumpsuit and jacket, she realized that she looked, she had to admit, simply stunning, and the fate of a considerable sum of money was sealed. Then, by hook or by crook, she managed to get an appointment with the hairstylist, who was swamped with clients preparing for corporate parties. To look her best, she needed to get a haircut and colour just before the trip. "All right, fine," the hairdresser sighed heavily, listening to yet another tearful request. "I'll cut your hair on the evening of the 29th, and my colleague will do your colour. Aislinn, I really can't. She'll do it just as well, but it will be more expensive, sorry." Aislinn had to pay the other hairstylist significantly more, and what did that matter compared to the joy of the upcoming trip? The company's departure was set for the morning of the 31st, and on the 30th of December, Aislinn went to her last work shift of the year. She worked as a nurse in one of the departments of a large city hospital. Despite the challenges and demands of her job, Aislinn genuinely loved her work. She performed her duties professionally and with dedication, earning the love of her patients and the respect of her colleagues. She had been working in the department for nearly 4 years, joining right after nursing school, and was considered a veteran among the staff. The start of her workday was typically filled with greetings, friendly nods, hurriedly changing into her uniform, and catching up on the latest hospital gossip. Today, however, the usual chatter included New Year's greetings. Everyone seemed especially cheerful, and even the usually serious deputy head of the department wore festive sparkling snowflakes on his head. Aislinn looked forward to the lunch break when she and her colleagues would exchange small, thoughtful gifts, as was their tradition. Later that evening she planned to rush home, pack her bag, and try on her stunning ski suit one last time before the trip. She wanted to look her best for Kevin. "Becca, come to my office when you're done," the head nurse called out, peeking into the ward where Aislinn was setting up an IV for a patient. "Listen, Aislinn," the woman sat at her desk, head down, writing quickly. "You know the work schedule for the weekend, right?" "Yes, of course. My shift is on the 4th of January. I'll be here as scheduled," Aislinn confirmed. "That's what I wanted to discuss," the head nurse said. "We have a problem. Dolores can't work on the 1st as scheduled, so I need you to cover for her." "No, wait, I can't work on the 1st. And why me?" Aislinn interrupted, her usual compliance faltering. The head nurse looked up, surprised. Over the years, Aislinn had built a reputation as a reliable, non-confrontational employee, but now that very reputation seemed to be working against her. "Why not you?" the head nurse retorted. "We have a difficult situation, and we need you to work on the 1st. "Harriet, I've already worked 2 New Year's nights in a row, remember?" Aislinn pleaded, still hoping for a peaceful resolution. "Life isn't fair," the head nurse philosophized. "You're single and have no children. What difference does it make where you celebrate? It might even be more fun here." Harriet was generally a decent person, and her contributions to the hospital were undeniable. However, for some reason, she had taken a disliking to Aisling from the moment she joined the department, despite Aisling giving her no cause. The young nurse had felt this disfavour in the unfair distribution of shifts and ward assignments. Her colleagues even jokingly called her the boss's pet. Until now, this bias hadn't significantly affected her, but this time was different. "I can't," Aisling insisted. "I have plans. I'm leaving the city for 3 days tomorrow. I specifically asked for 4 days off. It's the first time I've asked in 4 years. People are waiting for me." "Well, they can wait," the head nurse said dismissively. "I can't set up for everyone. You're working on the first. End of discussion. I'll make sure you get a bonus." Clearly, the head nurse wanted the final say, and to end the unpleasant conversation. "No, that won't do," Aisling said, struggling to keep her composure. She put so much time, money and hope into this trip, so she just couldn't let someone ruin it. "If there's no one to work, then you do it and give yourself the bonus," she said. Perhaps she shouldn't have said that, but Aisling was hurt and frustrated that once again she was expected to fill a gap without consideration for her own plans. "Well, if you refuse the swap, you don't have to come to work at all," the head nurse stammered, rising from her chair. "You're fired. Pack your things and be out of the department by the end of the day." "What do you mean?" Aisling asked, stunned. She hadn't expected the conversation to take such a turn. "Exactly that," the woman sneered. "If you won't consider our position, then goodbye, and don't even think about complaining. My authority against yours. Who do you think will win? Me, of course. And besides, you might not find another job in your field in this city. Rumours spread fast, you know." This was so unfair and disgusting that Aisling couldn't find the right words. As always in such situations, she felt lost and preferred to step aside. Fighting back tears, she left the head nurse's office and trudged to the nurse's station. Aisling had never felt such bitterness before. She had known grief when her father died, a profound, irreplaceable loss, but today's events were the doing of a malicious, nasty woman who, like an evil fairy, had instantly ruined her holiday spirit and anticipation of the new year. Even the street, adorned with sparkling lights, seemed dull and grey now. Travelling in this mood was unthinkable. And with what money? After her preparations, buying gifts for family and friends, and paying rent, she had barely enough to last until her next paycheck. Now it seemed that paycheck might never come. Finding a new job the day before New Year's was unlikely. Aisling laughed bitterly. She needed to call Samantha and cancel the trip. At least she'd save some money on travel and entertainment. As expected, Samantha wasn't satisfied with the phone call and showed up at Aisling's door an hour later, looking like an angry fury. After hearing Aisling's story, she scoffed. "All right, we'll handle that nasty toad from your department, and it won't be hard. Anyway, I'll handle it after the holidays. We'll get your job back. Now, get ready." "No, Samantha," Aisling said firmly. "I can't. I'm not going. I've made up my mind. Since this happened, I'll visit my mum, congratulate her, and then look for work. I'll have to give up this apartment anyway. I can't afford it. I'm going to my hometown and find a job there. They always need nurses at the hospital." "Brilliant plan," Samantha sneered. "If you go back to that backwater, you'll never leave. You'll be stuck there forever with your bedpans and hot water bottles. You'll get fat and even dumber. I won't even be able to marry you off. You already made a mistake choosing nursing school over music school. No way. Go visit your mum if you insist on not going with us, but be back in the city by the 3rd. I'll be back by then. I have a brilliant idea for where you can quickly find work." "What idea?" Aisling asked suspiciously. "It's a fantastic opportunity," Samantha repeated. "I have an old client whose legal affairs I handle. He owns a small restaurant, a decent and popular place in the city. You, with your reclusive lifestyle, wouldn't know it. Anyway, the restaurant has live music with a small stage where 1 or 2 artists perform. This could be perfect for you. You'll do a couple of trial performances. The owner is having trouble finding replacements for his musicians during these endless holidays. You could fill in. I can't believe you're serious, Samantha, Ashlyn exclaimed, suddenly anxious. Me on a stage? Never! I'll embarrass myself and you too. I can't do it, no way. I'm not sending you to perform at the Royal Orchestra, Samantha calmly replied, ignoring Ashlyn's protests. It's just a restaurant, not an opera house. Your skill level is more than enough. Remember your performance at Dasher's summer party. You were wonderful, and I'm not easily impressed. So stop shouting and save your voice for the performance. And speaking of money, Samantha, who had started to leave, turned back. If the performances go well, the restaurant owner is willing to pay you this much. She handed Ashlyn a business card with a handwritten figure. Ashlyn looked at the number and gasped. It was equal to half of her monthly salary at the hospital. Long after Samantha left, Ashlyn sat on the couch, holding the small piece of paper. Finally, she stood up and looked in the mirror. Her reflection showed a dishevelled face with reddened eyes. "Am I a singer?" she muttered. "This is ridiculous. Me on a stage? Even a small one is impossible. Playing guitar among friends by a campfire is one thing, but singing for paying customers is another. No, absolutely not. I'll call Samantha tomorrow and tell her not to count on me. I'll have to borrow money from someone until I find a new job and figure out what to do next." Exhausted from the eventful day, Ashlyn fell asleep as soon as her head hit the pillow. She had always been able to fall asleep quickly and deeply, no matter the circumstances. Her mother used to joke that Ashlyn could sleep through anything. The next morning, Ashlyn woke up refreshed, though the previous day's events were still on her mind. Samantha's phone went straight to voicemail. Of course, they left early this morning, Ashlyn sighed, feeling a pang of regret for missing the trip. She decided to return the ski suit to the store on her way to the train station to get some money back. Her mother, who lived alone since her father's passing, was overjoyed to see her. She bustled around, fretting that there was nothing to feed her unexpected guest. The nearly empty fridge indicated that her mother hadn't planned much for the New Year celebration. This saddened Ashlyn, who remembered the elaborate feasts her mother used to prepare when her father was alive, and she still lived at home. Her mother used to start planning the menu well in advance, considering everyone's tastes, even their old cats. She would buy a vast number of groceries and transform into a kitchen fury, as her husband called her during those days. The result was a magnificent, abundant and delicious feast that Ashlyn would remember for a long time. This year, her mother had clearly given up on the New Year traditions. Ashlyn was determined to change that. "Mum, I can't recognise you," Ashlyn playfully protested, making a grocery list. "What about my favourite salad with pomegranate, chicken with prunes, and sandwiches with caviar? Remember our tradition, Mum?" "Well, how can we do without it? It's 2 o'clock now. There's not much time, but we can still manage something. I'll run to the store, and you quickly defrost the marinated chicken. I saw you have some. And start preparing the vegetables for the salad." Inspired by her daughter's visit, Ashlyn's mum flew around the kitchen and managed to catch up on her New Year's cooking marathon in record time. The festive table they created together was, of course, much simpler than in previous years, but it still turned out delicious and impressive. Mum cheered up, had a couple of glasses of champagne, and they had a wonderful evening together, even watching the televised New Year's greetings and the chimes. "Play for me, Ashlyn," Mum suddenly asked. "I haven't heard you in 2 years." Ashlyn looked at her mother in surprise. She had never asked her to play before. "I get enough of Ashlyn's rehearsals," she used to grumble. "It's like living in a music school branch all day, either vocalising or practising guitar passages." Ashlyn picked up the guitar and slowly exhaled. She always did this before playing, like a ritual to tune herself with the instrument. That evening, she was in a state where she played and sang exceptionally well, effortlessly, as if the sounds came not from her throat but from her heart. Her fingers, confident and strong, plucked and strummed the strings, racing to keep up with the melody. "You really are an artist, Aisling," Mum said, echoing her father's words. She smiled and kissed her daughter on the forehead. "Thank you. You play wonderfully, and your singing is especially beautiful. There's something special about it now, something real. It's a shame only I got to hear you. We should have invited the neighbours." Mum had long since gone to bed, but Aisling couldn't calm down after her mother's words. Of course, parents aren't the most objective listeners, but her mum had never reacted like this before. She said, "I've started singing differently, in a special way. Interesting." Aisling looked around the room, familiar to her since childhood. The same curtains with pink and brown flowers hung on the windows. The old TV with its bulky screen stood on a cabinet with a broken door that never closed properly. A plant in a chipped clay pot sat on the windowsill, with a few dried leaves scattered nearby. The faded wallpaper darkened in the corners. Everything was the same as it had been years ago, only much older and more worn. Suddenly the reality of it all hit her hard. It was easy to sit in the city and talk about moving back home, but actually being here was different. The thought of coming home every day to this predictable life was overwhelming. Aisling imagined herself growing as faded and worn as the old wallpaper and curtains. "I'll come back, sit here with Mum on this old sagging couch, drink tea from chipped cups, and work. I'll earn just enough not to starve. The years will pass, and before I know it, I'll be an old woman." Aisling pressed her face into the pillow, feeling a mix of shame and fear. She didn't want this life, but the thought of being stuck here, like Samantha had warned, was terrifying. "No, I don't want that," she whispered to herself. "I want to live differently, at least try to live differently. Perhaps it's worth trying to perform, even in a restaurant, in front of people who essentially don't care about her. Since they don't expect anything from her, there's nothing to fear. Even if she embarrasses herself, only she and Samantha will remember it. And if she sees even one pair of appreciative eyes, it will be a victory. Maybe Samantha is right. This is her chance to show herself to people, to declare her right to a different life, one that's vibrant and beautiful." After all, she had always dreamed of this, ever since she first touched the most wonderful instrument in the world, the guitar. Aisling picked up her old guitar, feeling its familiar weight on her lap, and gently strummed the strings with her eyes closed. Her father had started teaching her to play when she was 8. "You know, Aisling, the guitar is not just an instrument, a piece of wood with strings," her father would say. "It's a full-fledged participant in any gathering, and the one who plays it is the king or queen of the company." Even without her father's enthusiastic words, Aisling wanted to learn to play the guitar. She had always loved the sound of the strings, hearing them since childhood, when her father played simple melodies on his old guitar. After mastering a few chords under her father's guidance, Aisling tried singing. "Aisling has a good voice," her father declared to her mother. "It's clear and strong. She should practice playing and singing. And she needs a decent instrument. She won't learn much on my old guitar." "And where will we find the money for a guitar?" her mother asked. "And I suppose lessons aren't free either." "Why do you say that?" her father replied gloomily. "I'm not staying home out of laziness. I just can't find work right now." Her mother sadly shook her head, ending what she saw as a pointless conversation. Aisling looked at her parents, fearing another argument, and silently resenting her mother for being unfair to her father. Her father had been home for several months, first bedridden with a complex leg fracture, then relearning to walk. During his recovery, the factory where he had worked for many years closed down. Despite his knowledge, his limp and modest appearance made it difficult for him to find a new job. Her mother, working to support all 3 of them, grew increasingly irritable. "It's foolish to live in constant feud with your only brother," Aisling overheard one day, returning from school earlier than usual. Her parents were in the kitchen, arguing as they often did, not noticing the front door slamming shut. Her father had spoken these words. "Stop it! You know very well I will never speak to Xander again. I have my dignity after all." Her mother's voice retorted, "Remember, I'd rather starve than make peace with him." "Mum, do you have a brother?" Aislinn finally asked her mother one day, as the question had lingered in her mind since she had accidentally overheard her parents' conversation. "What? How do you know?" her mother asked, surprised. Realizing it was pointless to deny, she grudgingly admitted, "Yes, I have an older brother, but he betrayed me and your granny many years ago, and I want nothing to do with him. And I also want you to stop asking stupid questions. These are dark family secrets, you see. It would be better if you heard it from your mother, but it seems like we're gossiping," her father explained when Aislinn asked him about it. "Dad, Mum strongly refuses to talk about it," Aislinn whined. "Your mum had an older brother, Xander. Their parents split up. It was a bad breakup. There was a scandal, a division of belongings through the courts. It was just awful. Imagine what the kids went through. In the end, they divided the children too. Xander stayed with his father and your mother stayed with her mother. And for some reason, she got it into her head that Xander should have refused to stay with his father. Can you imagine? Why should a child, especially a boy, betray his father?" "What does being a boy or a girl have to do with it?" Aislinn protested. "I, for one, would never betray you." "Well, thank you, sweetheart, but adults shouldn't put children in such situations. Your mother thought Xander should have said he wanted to stay with his mother. Since he never did, she decided her brother was a traitor, and that idea stuck with her, no convincing her otherwise. Though I think their mother had a lot to do with it. You didn't get to meet your grandmother. She passed away too soon, but I remember her well. She was a very domineering woman, used to having things her way, but here was her own son who refused to live with her. After the divorce, she made sure that neither the parents nor the children communicated any more. She even moved from the capital to our backwater. It's awful, Aislinn, and wrong to refuse your relatives while they're alive." Dad sighed heavily and continued after a pause. "My life turned out such that I have no relatives left. Sometimes you just want someone close to you, a blood relative." "Daddy, but you have me," Aislinn said, upset again. "Of course I have you," Dad smiled, "but having a brother or sister is something special, different. I'll never experience that. And our mum has a brother, her own flesh and blood, but she refuses to even meet or talk to him. How can that be? Life goes on, and maybe one day it will be too late." Dad looked confused. "Just don't tell Mum about our conversation, okay? Why did I even tell you all this? It's not my secret, not my story. I still hope your mum will stop being stubborn and remember that family is the most precious thing we have." Aislinn was deeply affected by what she heard. Wow, Mum has a brother but doesn't want to talk to him. It's a shame. It would be interesting to meet my own uncle. After Dad's words about Aislinn's talent, she was enrolled in music school for guitar and vocals. She practiced diligently and received well-deserved praise from her teachers. From the 7th grade, Aislinn began participating in competitions and concerts. Besides her voice and skill, she looked great on stage. She resembled her mother more and more as she grew up, with large grey eyes framed by long curved lashes that made her gaze radiant. She had beautiful defined eyebrows, and when she smiled, cute dimples appeared on her cheeks. Everyone expected Aislinn to pursue music after high school, perhaps attending a music college. But life had other plans. Dad fell ill again, this time much more seriously, with no hope of recovery. He was diagnosed with cancer. For a couple of years the family fought the disease and poverty. Aislinn finished school and enrolled in a medical college, working evening shifts at the hospital to make ends meet. "Music isn't for me anymore," she would shrug when asked about her musical pursuits. "We've ruined you, Aislinn. I've ruined you," Dad whispered, his voice growing weaker each time, holding her hand. He was fading away, and she couldn't do anything but cry, hiding her tears and softly sing his favourite songs. After Dad's funeral, Mum suddenly said, "That's it. No need to stay here with me, an old woman. Go, start a new life, and may you find happiness." Aislinn received her nursing diploma and moved to the big city, and now the circle threatened to close. She was back at her childhood room, as if she had never left. The old guitar lay comfortably on her lap. No, this won't do. Aislinn carefully placed the instrument on the couch, stood up, and walked to the window. The New Year's night was ending, and the air was barely tinged with morning light. Just as this New Year's morning inevitably arrived, Aislinn Becker felt an irresistible pull toward a new life, toward her beloved music. On January the 3rd, she was back in the city. "Ah, you've arrived," Samantha's voice sounded through the phone. "Well done. To be honest, I had my doubts. I thought I'd have to drag you out of your hometown swamp by force. So, are you ready? Have you rehearsed? Prepared suitable clothes?" Aislinn remained silent, feeling dejected. What had seemed obvious and right on the morning of January the 1st now felt like a reckless adventure and sheer foolishness. The confident, beautiful singer who had once lifted her head now shrank back, trembling with fear and losing all her confidence. "Samantha," Aislinn mumbled. "I see," Samantha interrupted decisively. "Wait there, I'm coming over, and don't you dare run off." Samantha burst into the apartment, looking vibrant and fresh, her cheeks flushed from the cold. She brought with her a sense of excitement and energy. In contrast, Aislinn sat pale with dark circles under her eyes, trembling with anxiety. "What's wrong? What are you afraid of? This is nonsense. Just go on stage and sing, just like you've done dozens of times for friends and family. Besides, don't you have a conscience? What kind of position are you putting me in? I promised to bring an artist for a couple of performances. Is that so hard? Think of it as a favour to me." "Samantha, I have nothing to wear." Aislinn tried to excuse herself, but Samantha was ready. "You don't, but I do," Samantha smiled, unwrapping a large package. "Listen, who are you trying to fool? I've known you all my life, and I know all your tricks. Don't look so gloomy. It's not a dress with slits down to your navel. You'd faint if it were. It's just a great silver shirt that will look fine even with the jeans. It'll do for the first time. Now get dressed. I promised we'd be there by 6. Samantha herself was dressed in a stunning evening gown with a plunging neckline and an open back. Clearly she had no intention of missing her friend's artistic debut. Aislinn immediately felt a surge of confidence, but it wavered again as they arrived at the restaurant where she was to perform. The venue was in the city centre, and Aislinn had seen its advertisements everywhere. It was a trendy and popular place, though not large, resembling a luxurious and elegant meeting spot for old friends, rather than a bustling nightclub. The patrons were dignified and well-dressed, mostly middle-aged and older, exuding an understated yet expensive elegance. "Go get ready for your performance. I'm heading to the main area. After all, I came to the restaurant with a man. Go on, they're waiting for you." Samantha nudged her friend toward the staff entrance and glided away to meet her admirer. "You must be Aislinn. Hello." A friendly young woman greeted her with a genuine smile and a welcoming gesture. "I'm Holly, the restaurant manager. We've been expecting you. Please come in. We'll do a quick touch-up on your makeup, and in about 40 minutes we'll call you to the stage. All right? Don't be so nervous, Aislinn." Unexpectedly, the young woman touched her hand. "I know you're not a professional singer, but let me tell you, I heard you sing by change in a group setting about 6 months ago. You don't remember me, but I remember you very well. I haven't heard anything like it in a long time, and believe me, in this job, I've seen plenty of so-called artists. Half of them can't hold a candle to you, so be brave and good luck." Aislinn smiled gratefully. Then she stepped onto the stage, and within seconds, all her fears vanished. A sense of remarkable calm washed over her. Her fingers confidently and gently caressed the guitar strings, and her vocal cords trembled with anticipation of joy and strength. She began to sing, purely, deeply and tenderly, as only truly musical and passionate women can. Most importantly, in the audience were those eyes that looked at her with surprise at the first sounds of her voice and guitar, and they never left her. There were significantly more admiring gazes than the single pair she had modestly dreamed of just days before. After the last notes of the guitar faded, the room fell silent. Not even the usual clinking of cutlery could be heard. Then a tentative, almost apologetic clap broke the silence, followed by another and another, until the applause filled the room. Aisling was met with a genuine ovation. It was surprising how such reserved and calm visitors could create such a commotion. The young singer returned to the stage again and again, completely overshadowing everyone else who performed that evening. Finally, when the administrator announced the end of the programme, Aisling, still dazed by everything that had happened, stepped into the hall. A grey-eyed, elderly blonde man approached her, looking at her with astonishment and admiration. "I'm simply amazed, thank you," he said, handing her a small bouquet of exquisite flowers. "Aisling, this is a total triumph," Samantha said, gently adjusting a stray lock of Aisling's hair, with a new-found respect, as if rediscovering her lifelong friend. "You really outdid yourself tonight. By the way, do you know who that man is?" "He's the owner of the restaurant, the same client I recommended you to, the one who needed a girl with a guitar. If the owner is this pleased, you can consider your fee well earned. I wouldn't be surprised if he offers you a permanent contract. He's serious about it, and even asked me for help to persuade you. He even asked what your mother's name is." Samantha chuckled. "Seriously, Aisling, you've done incredibly well. If you think I'll leave you alone now and let you bury your talent among enemas, IVs and other medical stuff, you don't know me well. Too much time has already been wasted." The next morning Aisling struggled to wake up, wondering if the previous evening had been a fantastic dream. But the elegant bouquet on the table, with its intoxicating scent, confirmed that it had all been real. The stage, the ovation, the shouts of "Bravo!", the flowers, and the handsome older man. Half an hour later the phone rang. "Listen, Aisling, I don't understand what's going on," Samantha said, sounding unusually confused. "My client, the restaurant owner, called me this morning. He wants you to meet him at the notary's office at noon." "Why?" Aisling asked, still half asleep. "I don't know," Samantha replied. "Maybe you impressed him so much that he wants to leave you all his possessions. Who knows? Aisling, believe me, I'm as surprised as you are. But he's an honest and decent man, and he won't propose anything improper or illegal. Let's go, if only out of curiosity." "We?" Aisling finally asked. "Of course, I won't leave you alone. Consider me your personal lawyer." At the appointed time they arrived at the notary's office. The handsome elderly man with grey eyes stood to greet them. The night before, overwhelmed by her success and tired from the spotlights, Aisling hadn't noticed him clearly in the dimly lit restaurant. But now, in the daylight, his face struck her. He looked incredibly familiar, making him less inexplicably close and dear. "Aisling," he said, his voice trembling, "it's incredible, but it seems we're related. I'm Xander, and I—" "You're my mother's older brother," Aisling finished for him. It suddenly became so obvious that no further proof was needed. After the initial shock, Xander told Aisling how he had tried many times over the years to reconcile with his sister, and how he had accidentally learned about his niece. He had even visited the hospital to see Aisling and confirm her resemblance to his sister. He had long ago prepared and signed documents transferring ownership of a large apartment to her, hoping that his sister would finally forget the old, meaningless grudges and give them both a chance to reunite their destinies. They talked for a long time, sharing their stories, marvelling, crying, and laughing as they looked at each other, hardly believing it was happening. "Samantha, tell me honestly," Ashlyn said, looking at her friend with amused irony. "When you first told me about the restaurant, did you already know that Xander was my uncle, and that was the real reason, not my incredible singing talent?" "Well, even if I did, who knew you'd turn out to be not just his niece, but also truly an incredible, talented singer?" Samantha laughed heartily. As Ashlyn's life took an unexpected turn with the discovery of her uncle and her blossoming music career, she also found herself thinking more about her personal life. The memories of her encounter with Kevin lingered in her mind. Especially the tender moment when he kissed her cheek. She wondered if there could be more between them, if the connection they shared could grow into something deeper. One day, as she was rehearsing at the restaurant, she noticed a familiar face in the audience. It was Kevin, watching her with the same admiration she had seen in his eyes before. After her performance, he approached her, his smile warm and genuine. "Ashlyn, you were incredible," he said, his voice filled with sincerity. "I've been thinking about you a lot. I couldn't stay away." Ashlyn felt a flutter in her heart, a mix of excitement and nervousness. "I've been thinking about you too," she admitted, her voice soft. They started spending more time together, going on walks in the park, sharing stories over coffee, and laughing at each other's jokes. Kevin's kindness and support were a comfort to Ashlyn, especially as she navigated her newfound fame and family revelations. Their bond grew stronger with each passing day. One evening, as they sat by the river watching the sunset paint the sky with hues of orange and pink, Kevin took her hand. "Ashlyn," he said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion, "I love you. I want to be by your side, supporting you in everything you do. Will you marry me?" Tears of joy welled up in Ashlyn's eyes as she nodded, her heart overflowing with happiness. "Yes, Kevin, I love you too, and I want to spend the rest of my life with you." Their wedding was a beautiful celebration of love and new beginnings, surrounded by family and friends, including Ashlyn's mother and uncle. They exchanged vows under a canopy of flowers. As they danced their first dance as husband and wife, Ashlyn knew that she had found her true partner, someone who would support her dreams and love her unconditionally. Together they built a life filled with love, laughter and music. Ashlyn continued to pursue her passion for singing, with Kevin by her side every step of the way. The caregivers and teachers sincerely strove to make this day as festive and memorable for the orphans as it was for all children in every school. No one should leave without a farewell and a kind word. The adults loved them, wished them happiness, and hoped that everything would turn out well for them. "I am at peace for you, girls," said their beloved caregiver to Dara and Mandy, who stood embracing in the assembly hall. "You have dreams, aspirations, and every chance to achieve what you desire. The most important thing is not to lose your friendship. Always stick together." "We will," the girls promised in unison. "We are sisters, after all." Of course they were not sisters, just very close friends since childhood. This friendship even surprised some, given how different Mandy and Dara were. They shared only their orphaned state, both knowing nothing about their parents. But there were many like them in the orphanage, and the girls did not dwell on it. They were just like everyone else. Mandy, however, in her teenage years, had once talked about wanting to find her mother, but Dara did not support this idea. "You do what you want, but I'm not going to look for anyone," she said. "I don't understand why it's necessary. If they didn't need us, then we don't need them either. Why force ourselves on them? Besides, there are stories where children find their parents and later regret it. A few years ago, there was a girl who, after graduation, found both her mother and father, and now she doesn't know how to get rid of them. They keep coming to her asking for money for alcohol. Why do we need parents like that?" "I just thought, what if mine are different?" Mandy confessed. "Well-known artists, for example." "They'd be the same, or even worse. They'd tell you stories about how you were stolen or switched at birth, but the truth is they abandoned you, so don't dwell on such nonsense. Of course, if some millionaire found me and said he's my father, I wouldn't refuse, but that will probably never happen. I won't go looking for anyone, neither millionaires nor drunkards." Dara laughed. "Neither will I," Mandy agreed, also smiling, though her voice held a hint of sadness. That was who they were. Dara, a vibrant brunette, was lively, active and independent, and Mandy, pale, fair-haired and a bit plump, was calm and thoughtful, always ready to agree with her friend. This did not bother her, and Dara did not take advantage of it. They simply loved each other and seriously considered themselves more than just friends, almost like sisters. But their dreams were different. Dara, since childhood, had been captivated by a film featuring a stewardess. She was struck by the beauty of the woman and the romance of the profession. She immediately declared that she too would become a stewardess when she grew up. Some laughed at her, others said it was too dangerous, but Dara was undeterred. She knew she would become a stewardess and was sure her friend would join her in this pursuit. But here she faced disappointment. For the first time, Mandy disagreed with her. "Oh, Dara, stewardesses? That's more your thing. You're brave and beautiful, but I'm a scaredy cat. I'm even afraid of flying," Mandy said. "Oh, as if you've flown much. You've never even seen a plane. But once you sit in one and rise above the clouds, oh, you won't want to come down," Dara insisted. "Maybe flying once would be exciting, but if it's your job, I don't know. You know, I want to get married, have children and take care of them. How can I have a family if I'm always flying away? No, that job doesn't suit me. I've decided to go to a pedagogical college and become a kindergarten teacher. That's definitely for me. I'll learn to raise children properly, and it will be easier with my own. And this job is suitable for a family person." "I think that job is just boring, spending all day with children, at home and at work. I might get married someday, but that's later. And I'll try to marry a pilot. We'll fly together," Dara said. "Leave the children at home or with strangers when you fly?" Mandy asked. "When I have children, I won't leave them with anyone. I'll take care of them myself and be with them every minute." "Oh, Mandy, you're really dreaming fascinatingly. Family, children, and I only want to travel and see the world, and being a stewardess is perfect for that." "Well, yes, it is, but you can see the world without being away from home for too long, like going on vacation somewhere and then returning to your beloved home, and living there peacefully with wonderful memories." "Oh, you'll just be a homebody, Mandy. I didn't expect that from you, that everyone has their own path. I won't argue with you. Maybe it will even turn out better this way. You'll fly on vacation on my plane, and I'll leave my children with you while I'm on flights." This arrangement suited both of them. Initially, they still hoped they wouldn't have to part ways after leaving the orphanage. Mandy thought Dara might give up her dream and choose a more down-to-earth profession. Dara, on the other hand, never gave up hope of persuading her friend to join her. They lived in a small town with a pedagogical college, but no school for stewardesses. Dara had to leave for the big city to pursue her dream. As they parted, both girls cried and swore never to forget each other. "Oh, Dara, I can't even imagine it. How can you leave, and I'll be left alone? What will I do without you?" Mandy hugged her friend. "I told you, come with me. We'll study together," Dara consoled her. "And it's still not too late. There must be plenty of pedagogical colleges in my city." "No, I've already enrolled here. I'll stay here. Why go anywhere else? But we'll never abandon each other. We'll call, right? You'll miss me too, won't you?" "Of course I will. You'll get married, just like you dreamed. You won't have time for me. Oh, Mandy, I didn't realise how hard it would be to say goodbye to you. We really are like family. Yes, you're my only family. And even when someone else comes along, a husband, children, I'll never forget you. I promise. You're the closest to me, my sister, and I'll teach my future family to love you. For a while after parting, that's how it was. The friends wrote long letters to each other and spent hours on the phone sharing news. But adult life turned out to be much more complicated and hectic than they had imagined. Communication became increasingly rare. They had to study, master new professions, and each had her own circle of acquaintances. Of course, no one could replace each other, but these new friends were nearby, while the girls, due to the distance, couldn't meet whenever they wanted. Even during holidays, there were always matters that prevented them from visiting each other, but they tried to stay in touch. It wasn't difficult, as both were used to sharing everything first with each other. Thus, Dara learned that Mandy's main dream might soon come true. She had met someone she planned to marry. "Congratulations, my dear," Dara exclaimed over the phone. "Your dream has come true. Mine will too. By the way, I'm finishing school soon. I'll be a real flight attendant. So, tell me about your fiancé. What's his name? And show me a picture. I need to know who my best friend is trusting." "Oh, Dara, I don't have a photo. He doesn't like being photographed. Says he doesn't look good in pictures. And I think it's true. He's not very photogenic. Even in his passport photo, he looks much older than he is. But he's handsome. His name is Tyler, and he seems to love me too. I hope you can make it to the wedding, because I won't get married without you. Please, find some time for me. Tell me when you're free, so I can plan accordingly. I miss you so much." After finishing their studies, they finally managed to see each other. Dara came to her hometown, but only for a brief visit to see her friend. She didn't plan to stay, as work awaited her. It turned out that Mandy's wedding was still in the planning stages, although Tyler had already proposed. Dara also didn't get to meet her best friend's fiancé. He was away on business at the time. Although Mandy couldn't explain where he worked, she said her beloved was planning to start his own business. She showed a photo of Tyler, but it was of poor quality. Either he wasn't photogenic or the photo was taken poorly. It was difficult to make out his face. Dara, not wanting to upset her friend, said that Mandy's fiancé was quite handsome. Although she found the mystery surrounding him strange. He didn't like being photographed, and Mandy didn't know where he worked. He was like a spy. Dara didn't know if such people could be trusted, but what could she do? She couldn't forbid Mandy to see the man she loved, and it was clear she did. During their brief reunion, the friends couldn't get enough of each other. The absence of outsiders, even the beloved fiancé, was convenient. They had a wonderful time together and were convinced that their friendship and kinship were still strong. Soon, however, it was time to say goodbye again. They cried, embraced, and swore eternal love and friendship. "Give my regards to your Tyler, and tell him your named sister will never let anyone hurt you," Dara joked through tears. "Oh, he'll never hurt me," Mandy sniffed. "I can tell him everything about you and pass on your greetings. And you? Haven't you found yourself a pilot yet?" "No, I decided not to rush it. I want to work on international routes, but for that I need to know languages. And I was lazy in school and didn't learn them properly, so I'll fly domestically. But I really want to go abroad." "You'll get what you want. I honestly didn't think you'd dare to enroll in that school, but you did, and you graduated. Dara, I'm so proud of you." Again, they were sure they were parting only for a short time, that they would see each other often and stay in touch, but life as usual had other plans. Dara, busy with flights, couldn't always find time to chat. She even missed her friend's wedding, unable to get time off work. Mandy wasn't offended, though she was a bit sad. But her beloved was always by her side, comforting her. "Forget about friends, Mandy. Married women don't need friends. We don't need anyone but each other, right?" And he had indeed quickly limited Mandy's social circle. They didn't even have a proper wedding, the kind every girl dreams of. In fact, they didn't have one at all. Mandy wanted to invite at least some friends from the orphanage or college, but Tyler insisted it was unnecessary. "Sorry, dear, but we can't afford a wedding right now. And honestly, I see no point in gathering a crowd and making a big fuss, spending a lot of money. Let's just register our marriage and have a small evening for the two of us. This is our celebration, for our future family." "I agree," Mandy said, as she always did when it came to Tyler's wishes. "Big gatherings just tire me out too. But shouldn't we at least have 2 friends, as a bridesmaid and best man?" Mandy asked tentatively. "That's not a good idea," Tyler replied. "If you invite one friend, rumours might start about why you only invited 2 persons and didn't have a big celebration. I've heard you can get married without anyone now." Mandy agreed with that too. She wasn't one to argue, especially with those she loved. Dara was also upset about missing the wedding. She called to congratulate Mandy and ask for photos. Mandy's response shocked her. "We didn't have a wedding. We just registered our marriage. No guests, no witnesses. Money is tight right now. Tyler wants to start a new business, so every penny counts." "I understand," Dara said, though she found it strange that Tyler wouldn't want to celebrate with his loved one. "But I have good news too. We're expecting a baby soon. I'm so happy. Oh, Tyler's home. I have to go." And she hung up without their usual goodbyes and affectionate farewells. She's completely lost her head over love, Dara thought, but she had no time to dwell on it. She had her own matters to attend to. Their communication dwindled after that, reduced to brief holiday greetings. It was understandable. One had a beloved job, the other a happy family life. Their dreams had come true, so there was no reason to lament the loss of their friendship. Dara learned about the birth of Mandy's daughter a month after the fact. "Sorry I didn't call sooner," Mandy explained. "I've been so busy with the baby. I had no idea it would be so much work." "I understand," Dara said. "Does your husband help?" "Oh, yes. Tyler is wonderful. He loves us both so much," Mandy gushed. "You named her Molly. That's a beautiful name." "I wanted to name her Dara, but Tyler said it's not appropriate to name a child after a living person. So we named her Molly. It's a good name, right?" "It's a good name," Dara agreed. "Send me a photo when you can." The conversation ended there, and Dara couldn't shake the feeling that Mandy was completely under Tyler's control. Months later, Dara finally received a photo of Mandy with her daughter. She noticed with some concern that Tyler wasn't in the picture. She wondered if Mandy was hiding something, perhaps embarrassed that she wasn't actually married. But she pushed the thought aside, reminding herself that Mandy would have confided in her if something was wrong. Dara considered visiting to see for herself what was going on, but she hesitated, not wanting to intrude. Meanwhile, Mandy was indeed married and loved Tyler deeply, but his behaviour was something strange. He refused to be photographed, meet friends, or introduce Mandy to his family or acquaintances. He didn't go out, and didn't let Mandy go out either. That is, not that he forbade, just showed his displeasure when she wanted to go out. For example, even at the very beginning of their life together, she said that they were expected to have a reunion of graduates of the orphanage. "Are you going to go?" He raised an eyebrow in surprise. "What's the point? You'll just hear complaints and boasts." So you don't think I should go? Well, if you like, go, of course. Tyler shrugged his shoulders, but on his face it was obvious that he would not approve if Mandy went to this meeting. All right, to be honest, I don't really want to. You're right, I probably shouldn't go anywhere. Let me bake you a fish pie tonight, she said, in an apologetic tone. That's what I'm talking about, her husband said cheerfully, and that was the end of the incident. And Mandy realised that he did not want her to go out and meet someone. Then it seemed, even in a way, flattering. He wants her to always be with him, afraid that someone will take her away. Whether that was true or not doesn't matter. After that, Mandy never said she wanted to go somewhere or meet someone. The two of them would sometimes go out, go somewhere, and that was enough. She missed Dara, but it was unclear how Tyler would react to this meeting. Having just met him, Mandy often told him about her, but then noticed that Tyler was uncomfortable with these conversations. He must really love me if he's even jealous of a friend, she decided, and stopped mentioning Dara. She also tried to talk on the phone only when Tyler was not at home. However, it wasn't just because of him that she reduced her communication with her friend. Mandy genuinely had no time. She had fully immersed herself in the family life and motherhood. She would have been completely happy if not for her health, which was increasingly failing her. Mandy had been told since childhood that she had a weak heart. She was exempt from physical education in her younger years due to a weak heart, but as she grew older, her heart seemed to strengthen. She ran and jumped just like the other children, perhaps not as fast or high, but she never shied away from active games. As she matured, she forgot about her childhood health issues. However, when she was pregnant, doctors warned her that motherhood could be a significant strain on her health. But how could this deter a woman who had always dreamed of being a mother, not just to one child, but to several? She was convinced that the doctors were being overly cautious. Everything would be fine, she knew. She saw childbirth as a miracle that could even resolve health issues. She was certain that the joy of motherhood would strengthen her. The birth of her daughter Molly was difficult, but all that mattered to Mandy was that her baby was healthy. She didn't dwell on her own condition. She kept her health problems from her husband, who seemed disinterested anyway. Though he lived with her and claimed to love her and their daughter, he offered little help or support. Mandy made excuses for him, attributing his distance to his business endeavours. She believed that once his business took off, their lives would improve. Meanwhile, she endured their current circumstances, believing they weren't so bad. Tyler's business ventures constantly faced setbacks, leading him to take out loans and accumulate debt. Maybe you shouldn't get involved in all this, Mandy timidly suggested. You could find a regular job, and I'll go back to work soon. Listen, if you don't understand anything, just keep quiet. Her husband snapped in irritation. What kind of job? A mechanic at the factory? Thanks a lot. But those pennies, keep your kindergarten salary. We'd starve. With those pennies plus your kindergarten salary, we'd starve. And, by the way, your demands aren't exactly modest. First, you need one thing, then another. Recently, what did you say? You need some medications that cost so much. You'd have to work at the kindergarten for 6 months just to afford them. Oh, Tyler, I'm not asking you for those medications. The doctor prescribed them. When I found out how much they cost, I refused to buy them right away. I'm not that sick to spend so much money. They truly had no money for treatment, so she stopped going to the doctor. Although she didn't feel well, she saw no point in seeing doctors. They would only suggest hospitalization, a trip to a health resort, or more prescriptions. She couldn't afford any of that. So Mandy hoped she would somehow get better on her own. After all, Some heart patients lived to a ripe old age. Perhaps Mandy would have too, if tragedy hadn't struck. Tyler died. Mandy was certain it was related to his business and the machinations of his competitors. Why else would his car suddenly burst into flames and plunge off a bridge into a river at full speed? The car was recovered, but there was nobody, only fragments burned beyond recognition. Those were buried in a closed casket, which devastated Mandy. Yet she had no time to care for herself. No sooner had she buried her husband than another blow came. It turned out Tyler owed money to several banks, and now that debt fell to Mandy as his heir. This was truly frightening. Creditors demanded repayment, but she had nothing. Just a weak heart and a 4-year-old daughter to care for. That's when she realised the full horror of her situation. She was utterly alone. Tyler had isolated her from any social interaction, presumably hoping to always be by her side. But now that he was gone, she had no one to turn to for help, and she desperately needed it. Eventually she felt so ill that she had to visit the doctor. "You need to go to the hospital immediately," the doctor said. "I can't, I have a daughter," Mandy replied fearfully. "Call your relatives, friends. Do you want to leave your daughter an orphan? Is there anyone?" "No, I mean, I have a close friend, but I don't know where she is now. She is a stewardess." "You must find her, and if that's not possible, tell me. We'll have to place the girl in an orphanage." This was Mandy's greatest fear. She couldn't bear the thought of her little Molly in an institution. "I'll find Dara. She will help us. Only then can I go to the hospital. But I can't leave my daughter now, and I don't want to give her to an orphanage," Mandy said firmly. She still had Dara's phone number, but she wasn't sure if she would answer. And what would she say? They had called each other sisters, but they were strangers, after all, and lately they had drifted apart. "Everything was fine. I didn't need her, and now I'm suddenly asking for help. How will that look?" Mandy thought, feeling uncomfortable about calling. She didn't even know how Dara was doing now. Maybe she was married, had a child, or anything could have happened. But she had no one else to turn to. She dialed the most forgotten number. Fortunately, Dara answered. "Dara!" was all Mandy could whisper before bursting into tears, unable to say another word. "What happened?" her friend exclaimed. "I don't know how to tell you, Dara. I'm afraid everything is too bad. I understand how this looks, but I have no one else to turn to." Mandy, struggling to speak through her sobs, briefly told Dara everything that had happened recently. "I understand you have your own things, and—" "What are you talking about?" Dara replied, alarmed and concerned. "What things can there be when you're in such a situation? I'll come as soon as I can, do everything I can, but I'm far away right now, so please wait a couple of days. And I need to submit a leave request at work, but don't worry. Don't be so upset. I'm sure everything will be fine." Mandy's ailing heart was not so sure. She felt that her time was running out. All her hope now rested on Dara, her only family. Dara arrived as promised a couple of days later, only to rush her best friend to the hospital. Mandy was in poor condition by then. The doctor could only shake his head. "Dara, what about Molly? What about my little Molly?" Mandy asked weakly. "Everything will be fine. I'm with her, don't worry. We will be coming to see you at the hospital. But for now, stay calm, please. You can't get upset." Mandy closed her eyes, seemingly a bit calmer, at least about her daughter's fate. She no longer had the strength to rejoice at her friend's arrival. Dara visited Mandy the next day. First she spoke with the doctor about the possible prognosis, but he only frowned. "What can I say? We can only hope for the best, but be prepared for the worst." Entering the hospital room, Dara realised that her friend likely didn't have long. Mandy looked so frail. Dara wanted to encourage her, but Mandy gestured for her to stop and leaned in closer, too weak to speak loudly. "Dara, please forgive me for not writing or calling for so long, but now you're the only one we have, both me and Molly. You're all we have left." Dara began to argue, but Mandy stopped her again. "Wait, don't interrupt. I don't have much strength left. I understand everything. I don't have long to live, and I'm only worried about one thing. Molly. Who will take care of her? Will she have to grow up in an orphanage like we did? Dara, promise me you won't abandon her. At least visit her so she knows she has someone who cares." Dara wanted to reassure Mandy, to tell her she would live a long and happy life, raise her daughter and see her grandchildren. But looking into Mandy's fading eyes, she held back her tears and said something else. "Don't worry, dear. No matter what happens, I won't abandon Molly. She won't go to any orphanage. She'll live with me, just as we dreamed of always being together as children. I will be there for her now. And for you too, Mandy. Get well, dear. I can't live without you. Even when we were apart, I always knew you were out there somewhere, and that thought sustained me." Mandy smiled weakly, her cold fingers gently stroking Dara's hand, as if comforting her or saying goodbye forever. Mandy passed away a few days later. Dara had to arrange the funeral and care for little Molly. Over the few days they spent together, Dara managed to bond with the girl. It wasn't difficult. It turned out that Molly knew all about Aunt Dara from her mother's stories, but now the child was in no mood for joy. Though she was very young, she understood that something terrible had happened to her mother. Dara didn't know how to explain it to her, so she simply comforted her, promising they would always be together. After burying her friend, Dara began the process of becoming Molly's legal guardian. She didn't tell Molly that her mother was gone, but the girl seemed to understand, especially when they moved to another city where Dara lived. She couldn't leave her job. Now she often recalled Mandy's words about how the profession of a flight attendant was unsuitable for a family person. She had to find a nanny. Gradually, their life stabilized. One day, Molly asked, "Aunt Dara, does this mean you're like a mum to me now?" "Yes," Dara replied, "but of course no one can replace your mother. Your mother and I weren't related, but we became the closest of friends because we loved each other." Molly accepted this and soon began calling Dara Mum. She knew where her new mother worked and soon expressed a desire to fly on an airplane. Dara understood the girl's longing. All children love new experiences. She promised to take her on a flight someday. "You see, it doesn't just depend on me. Other people have to allow you to come." "You ask them, please. Tell them I've never flown before and really want to, and I promise to behave well and not bother anyone." Wanting to make the little girl happy, Dara arranged it and one day took her on a flight. Molly was thrilled. She behaved very well, remembering all Dara's instructions. But nevertheless, an unpleasant incident occurred. Walking through the business class cabin, the little girl suddenly looked intently at a man, as if trying to recognize him. Then she rushed to him, shouting, "Dad, is that you? Daddy, where have you been?" Molly climbed onto the lap of the passenger, who looked utterly shocked and even frightened. "I didn't even recognize you at first. And why do you have such funny hair? Did you dye it?" The girl reached for the man's luxurious hairstyle, grabbed his hair, and the wig slipped to the side. Dara noticed the incident and rushed to apologize to the passenger. "I'm so sorry. Her father died a year ago, and then her mother passed away. The child mistook you for her dad. Please don't be angry with her, and forgive me too." "I understand," the man replied, still irritated, "and I'm willing to forgive, but you should keep a better eye on your child. It's not acceptable for her to jump on strangers' laps and grab their hair." In a private area, Dara scolded Molly. "What got into you, sweetheart? You can't behave like that. You scared the man." "He's not a man, he's my dad," Molly cried. "He left us and now he's pretending not to know me. Why is he doing this?" "It's probably not your dad, honey. You made a mistake. Many people look alike." "No, I didn't make a mistake. He's my dad. If he's going to act like this, then great. I won't recognise him either." Dara calmed Molly down and continued her work, but she couldn't stop thinking about the incident. The passenger Molly had mistaken for her father was actually with a woman, and the couple seemed quite wealthy. However, Molly's father had never been rich and was presumed dead, his body unrecognisable due to severe burns. Now, this man in a wig. Everything was suspicious, especially since Dara recalled that her friend's husband had always avoided being photographed, as if deliberately hiding. No matter how much Dara chased those thoughts away, they kept popping into her head. But she could not approach this man, already upset by Molly's antics, and ask him if he was Tyler. When the flight was over and the passengers got off, Dara walked through the business-class cabin and noticed that under the seat where the man was sitting there was a wallet. After the flight, Dara found the man's wallet under his seat. Inside were documents identifying him as David Levin, not Tyler Heaton, Mandy's husband's name. Dara called the number in the wallet to return it. The man was grateful and arranged to meet her in a public place near a supermarket. When Dara approached him from behind and called out, "Tyler Heaton," the man jumped and turned around. It was clear that he recognised his name. "Good day," Dara said, approaching him. "So Molly wasn't mistaken. You are her father?" "But why the deception?" "Your supposed death broke Mandy's heart and hastened her own death." "What are you talking about?" the man stammered, trying to hide his fear with annoyance. "You must be crazy. Now I see whom your daughter took after. I don't know any Mandy or Molly, and I don't want to know you. I'm not Tyler. You saw my documents." He snatched the wallet from Dara's hand and hurried away. Dara now knew for certain that this man was Mandy's husband. But those charred remains were in his car. Whose grave had Mandy mourned over, tearing her heart apart? Dara wondered what to do next. Should she go to the police? But with what evidence? All she had were the claims of a 5-year-old girl, yet doing nothing also seemed wrong. Dara felt a growing unease as she sensed someone watching her. She couldn't shake the feeling that she and Molly might be in danger because of her discovery about Tyler. She took a leave from work to stay close to Molly, ensuring the child was never left alone. One evening, as they returned home in gloomy weather, they encountered an elderly man who seemed unwell. Molly pleaded, "Mum, are we really going to leave this grandfather here?" "You're right, dear. We can't just leave him. Our home is nearby. Let's take him there. He can rest and maybe we can call his relatives or someone else." The old man agreed. At home he sipped hot tea and shared his story. "I lost my memory. Some vagrants found me in a ditch with a head injury, and I don't think I've always been a marginal. I just can't remember anything." "All right, you can stay with us for now," Dara allowed, deep down marvelling at the fact that mysterious and most likely criminal stories had surrounded her since some time. But she allowed her guest to wash and tidy up, and noticed that he wasn't that old yet, but quite a sturdy man. "I must be going mad," Dara thought, living alone with a child and inviting a strange man into our home at night. But she couldn't turn him away, especially with Molly showing such compassion and already calling him Grandpa, offering him various treats. Dara saw kindness in the man's eyes. I can't suspect someone in trouble of ill intent. I'll persuade him to see a doctor tomorrow, she decided. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Dara, expecting a neighbour, opened the door without hesitation. To her horror, Tyler stood on the threshold. Only now he looked neither frightened nor confused. This time his face was distorted with such anger, hatred, that his intentions were clear without words. Dara froze with fear for the first minute, but then she stepped towards the man, forcing him out of the apartment, but he pushed her back, angrily hissing. No, darling, it won't work that way. We'll talk inside, and don't you dare make a sound if you want the girl to live. She's your daughter, Dara whispered. Even better. She's used to hardship. Keep quiet, and this will be quick and clean. Tyler's iron grip tightened around Dara's neck. She realised he intended to strangle her. Unable to cry out, she stumbled backward, knocking over a shoe rack. Molly and the old man rushed out at the noise. What's going on here? The elderly man demanded. Getting rid of an unwanted witness, Tyler sneered, loosening his grip slightly. Want to join in, old man? With pleasure, the old man replied, swiftly punching Tyler and applying a series of moves that left him pinned to the floor. Call the police, the old man instructed Dara, coughing and leaning against the wall. He had also been injured. Tyler had fought back with a knife. Dara sent a frightened Molly to her room and quickly dialed the police and an ambulance. The ambulance and police arrived rapidly. The old man was taken to the hospital and Tyler to the police station. It turned out that he had been wanted by the police for a long time. His marriage to Mandy was just a way to hide and accumulate debts before disappearing, which is why he staged the accident. The remains that were identified as his actually belonged to one of his accomplices, whom Tyler had also disposed of. However, these criminal details no longer interested Dara. It was clear that the scoundrel would be convicted, and she and her daughter were now safe. Dara was more concerned about the man who had saved them, who was now in the hospital. Even little Molly mentioned the grandpa who had saved them several times a day. The doctors said that his injuries were not too severe, but he had lost a lot of blood and was still weak. It turned out that he too was missing, but it was his son who had been searching for him, not the police. The son had been looking for his father for several weeks, visiting hospitals and morgues, leaving his father's photo everywhere. Thus, the doctors easily identified the unknown patient as Ben Fletcher. His son, Judd, rushed to the hospital just as Dara was sitting by his father's bedside. The old man, who turned out to be not so old after all, still hadn't regained his memory. He didn't recognise his son immediately. Dara, after meeting Judd, a well-dressed and pleasant young man, told him how his father had been injured. "I'm so glad to finally know his name, and that you found him. Now everything will be all right for you, Mr. Fletcher," Dara said sincerely. "I hope so. I just can't remember anything," the patient admitted. "Forgive me, Judd, but Dara and her daughter feel closer to me than you right now," Mr. Fletcher confessed. "And I'm sure you'll remember everything now, and I hope you won't forget our address," Dara said. Judd began to tell his father's life story, recalling everything he remembered about his childhood and his mother, who had passed away early. At one point, tears started flowing from Mr. Fletcher's eyes as he began to remember. A doctor entered and asked the visitors to leave, as the patient was getting agitated. Dara and Judd left the ward, both holding back tears. Dara was touched by Judd's stories and agreed to meet him again. She hadn't been on a date in a long time, and after everything they had been through, She wanted to distract herself and talk to someone who was kind to her. The date went well, and Dara shared her life story, talking about how she became a mother to her adopted daughter and about her late friend. A relationship blossomed between Dara and Judd, and when Mr. Fletcher was discharged from the hospital, they greeted him as a couple, along with little Molly. "They say everything happens for a reason," Mr. Fletcher said, looking at them joyfully. Soon, Judd and Dara announced their decision to get married. Everyone was happy with this outcome, and Mr. Fletcher spared no expense, throwing them a lavish wedding.